Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Lakewood City Council Study Session Agenda for this Monday, August 12, 2024. I'll call this meeting to order. It's a little after 7:02. We have 4 items for discussion tonight. The first is a joint Public Safety Advisory Committee meeting update with our friends from the Public Safety Advisory Committee. So members, if you want to come on down, Marie, and join us at the dais. And then what I usually love to have everyone do is just introduce yourselves and then proceed with your discussion of the work plan. You got to press the little button there and I'll turn mine off to avoid feedback.
Good evening. Thanks for having us. My name is Camry Wilson. I'm the chair for the Public Safety Advisory Committee. Teresa, did you want to introduce yourself?
I'm Teresa King. I'm Teresa King.
I'm Mark Pila. Ray Dodds.
James Harrison.
You wanted to hear about our accomplishments for 2024? Okay. We started out the year in February. We had guest speaker Captain Westby come and speak to the group about the speed cameras, the school zones, and speed survey results. And we also had Chris Davis regarding the neighborhood association revitalization and his progress with those efforts. In April, we had Serena and Nathan with West Pierce Fire come out and talk to us about the emergency management coalition. And that was pretty amazing to listen to them talk about Code Red and how to sign up for that alert. In June, we had Karen Gilbert with West Pierce Fire Connect Care Group come out and explain that program and how it helps Lakewood residents. And then in August, we had Assistant Chief John Unfred. He gave an overview of the city's emergency management plans and the coalition. We also are hosting a table, and we got this confirmed for Truck and Tractor Day. There'll be, I think we have about 4 volunteers. We'll be at a table to give out information to the public and hear feedback from the community on the Public Safety Advisory Committee for awareness and visibility. I think that's about it.
That's about it. It looks pretty good. Any questions of our committee members, members of council? Anything else? So I know that there was a call for applicants for the kind of Citizens Police Academy.
Mhm.
So can you tell us a little bit about that and what your role may be with that?
So there was two of us that actively participated in the Citizens Academy. It was myself and Todd Wolf.
Oh,
And so
great.
that was an 8-week course every Tuesday, and it was very informative. I don't think as a citizen of Lakewood, I would have known about the program had I not joined the Public Safety Advisory Committee. And so it was very interesting to get to learn about the various departments within the police department. And you got to really see, I mean, we saw the K-9 unit, the Marine Services was one of my favorites, just how involved in different areas that they do with rescue and, you know, boat monitoring. Let's see, we also we got to drive the police car. That was awesome. And we did the VR training.
Yeah.
And that was really neat. We also got to see the drone, and it was very interesting to see what that looks like when you're maneuvering it.
Mhm.
So that was a great program.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Good feedback. Councilmember Brandstetter and then Councilmember Bell.
Yeah, well,
thank you for all the time that you spent thinking about what is a extremely important topic to the community and in the community to be able to go and do that. You know, later this evening in our discussion about goals, we've sort of fabricated a goal about reducing the fear of victimization in the community. And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about how real that is and what really could be done to move in that direction of it's more specific than just making people feel safe. Reducing fear of victimization is, I think, more targeted, but I was wondering what thoughts you had around how serious of a or prevalent of a concern that is in the community, and any thoughts about how we might go about it, or if that's going to be one of our goals for the next 2 years, what you might on a future work plan put in, looking at how you might help us with ideas and strategies.
I had the privilege of sitting here last year with Martin as he gave the report of our work plan for 2023. And I remember we talked about being the bridge between the community and the city, that you guys could bring back information to the legislator. And I know we were talking about doing a survey, a public survey. And one of our few last meetings, we were kind of confused as where we were in that process and wanted to know what your guys' expectation of us when it came to the public survey.
Well, I guess, you know, the survey idea is getting to be 3 years old,
Mhm.
and it predates the current police chief's view. And it was something that was, we thought that we were hearing a lot of individual voices, but not consistently hearing business voices.
Mhm.
And so that was the thought about the survey back then. I tend to think that maybe, and I would defer to the mayor to think that maybe with the ground underneath that idea has shifted somewhat. That you know, that we have through other means been hearing the voices of business more so over the past couple of years. Chief Smith has been having some initiatives and engaged with to engage business. So I don't really know what that is, and it may well be that your question is better directed at the chief as to what information from a survey would better help him in terms of his leadership of the department. And Mr. Mayor, I just defer that to you.
Who was the gentleman that did the survey already? We just had a presentation.
James Harrison, I was just going to add that the neighborhood community associations are a place that really where you start, I think, to gather information that you can send back and from listening to the various types of people and types of people who live in those communities. And the neighborhood night out is a good start. It always works. We seem to get quite a bit of participation. So that's one element that could probably go a long ways in helping reach or attain this goal, start working toward it.
When it also comes to like a public survey, I know we had a presentation from a gentleman named Chris, and we understand the city did a survey. We want to make sure that we don't duplicate questions. And so we don't know if the city wants to put together questions for our business public survey. We just don't want to re-ask questions that,
Right.
or information that you guys already have. So that's, I feel, where a hurdle has been as far as to getting out a survey.
Well, it's a good point, and Mr. Vargas is back there. He helped us with the last survey, and there's kind of a standardized survey that we utilized with similar questions so that we had a baseline that we could compare against every time we did the survey. But it came back with information in a small sampling that we didn't think was as helpful as it might have been. And so I think there was just some discussion among ourselves whether or not we could fashion a better survey with questions that perhaps are more relevant to our community, seeking those questions bubbling up from the community advisory boards and commissions like you folks. Then the pushback is, well, gee, if you tweak the questions, then you may not have good data to compare to your baseline. So we're still struggling with that a little bit. And so I don't want to lead you on a frolicking detour until we get our heads together about what we're going to do on that. But you know, it opens the question just kind of to a general conversation. How do you think things are going? We get our police stats, you know, once a quarter, how things are going. We think that public safety in the city is actually measurably improved. There have been some technological advancements that have really made great strides forward. For example, in auto thefts, we've seen a huge reduction in auto thefts as a result of some of the technological employments we've put into play, such as the flock camera system, and certainly having a full complement of officers hired, full staff, has helped get more people on the street. So we've seen some good public safety strides forward in that direction. But having you folks, having your sort of ears to the ground, if you will, in this capacity is also very helpful to say, well, gee, that may be great, but here's what we're hearing from the business community or otherwise, and here's what you might want to consider or think about. And so that's always very helpful to us. Any thoughts on that? I mean, how do you folks feel things are going individually from what you hear out there in the community?
I know one of our focuses for next year's work plan, or, you know, the rest of 2024 is visibility.
Right.
More visibility and being out there. So we were able to confirm volunteers for Truck and Tractor Day. And then there has been communication about maybe doing more farmers market informational booths set up. It is a large commitment. And so we do need full committee support.
Right.
But that's something that we can work on. So I just think if we focus on being part of the farmers markets, being part of Truck and Tractor Day, and being at a booth to share about the Lakewood Public Safety Advisory Committee, and to provide other information regarding emergency management, you know, evacuation levels, all sorts of information that's available, how to sign up for Code Red, the alert system. There's a lot of members that still are not aware of that. So I think more visibility will draw out questions from the public.
Great.
And open up dialogue.
Agreed. Yes, sir.
Well, one of the other things that has been going on is we've always had some relationship with the neighborhood associations.
Right.
And so each one of us was representative to the individual associations. And those have kind of fallen apart. And when Chris gave his report, it was kind of my understanding that those are being worked on and revised. We were, three of us here were pretty active in North Lakewood, and North Lakewood kind of they just gave up and said, oh, we're just plowing ground that's already been plowed, and stopped meeting. And some of the other ones really since 2019 have never come back really. And that was really a good source for us to get feedback, because we were right there and we could stand up and say, you know, if you got anything you'd like us to report and pass on. And so we're missing that part of it right now.
So more revitalized neighborhood associations for sure. I know we're working on that through Chris and other city staff, but it takes neighbors getting energized to come out and listen, right? So we have to have topics of interest to make sure that they know that it's going to be a short meeting, take good advantage of their time. There'll be, you know, refreshments. Usually there's coffee and cookies or something there. to draw them out. Did you have some thoughts on that?
Well, you answered one of my questions. I was asking at Truck and Tractor Day, if you had a booth, what types of things you would be doing. So that was great, and I appreciate that. I think those are all wonderful things. And then my next question tied into the neighborhood association revitalization. I know that we're working on that. We've brought somebody in. We're trying to really grow our neighborhood associations. Is there anything in particular that you guys could speak to that you're working on? Or I know it's in your work plan. I didn't know if you had any specifics where it's just there right now.
Yeah.
Maybe an update from Chris would be helpful.
And you would probably need information points from the department. So if you're the rep at the neighborhood association meeting, you can report, kind of like we get, talking points, so to speak, from the city on a weekly or monthly basis. Okay, that might be helpful for you. Once we
I
get
think
that up.
I think my view on that is that it was during, we were having the trouble with all the adult homes.
Right.
And that's really what kind of got North Lakewood started because that whole issue.
Yeah.
And so it was pretty solid. And then as that issue kind of waned a little bit, then it became obvious that Oak Brook was the driving force in that. But it wasn't just Oak Brook in that. There was a lot of area in there that wanted representation and didn't participate or didn't know the meetings were there. And the meetings kind of focused on the homeowners associations in
Okay.
Oak Brook. And so sometimes it was kind of difficult to get them to see other things in there also. There's other people here. The last meeting that they held, though, there were 3 or 4 people from other different areas within the North Sector, Sector 6, got up and said, we didn't know this is here, and this looks like a great place to have our voice heard. And then the next thing they kind of dissolved it.
Okay.
So unfortunately, but
Need
I think
an
that
update
the
on that.
guideline or the lines of demarcation for that has to be kind of drawn a little differently. I think maybe Oak Brook, yes, should be, they have separate issues and stuff, but then there's issues of Creekside Oaks, Country Place, and there's a couple other places, that are kind of just along Lakewood Drive there that have different issues too that we're dealing with. So, and we're also involved, James and I were involved with Tillamook, so, and they haven't met since 2019. Yeah, so we don't hear much from them.
Any other thoughts, Mr. Branstetter?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think to get back to the chair's question that we maybe want to revise our guidance and say that we're not really looking for a formal survey with questions that's sent to businesses that is similar but not replicative of the community surveys that we do more broadly, but that we're sort of give it back to them to develop their methodology to develop information for feedback to us, but that we don't really want to have them spend time writing questions, sending it out, and being a very formal piece that we need. I think we're beyond needing it from the pandemic ending time of when we thought a survey would be helpful, but maybe a survey isn't the right answer. We still want feedback, but it doesn't have to be in the form of a written survey that's put together with all the work that those entail.
Yep. Well, it's a good point. I think we need to noodle over where we are and then provide some additional direction that would be helpful so that they have something of value to do and it provides something of value to us. We are reviewing tonight part of our goals and objectives for the next biennium, actually to 2030. And a big goal, of course, is public safety, and it has subsets under that. So we'll discuss that tonight. And if that generates some consensus on gleaning some additional data from the neighborhood associations through you, we'll certainly let you know.
And Mr. Mayor, the only other thing that I'd want to mention, talking about later tonight, is that we're getting close to reviewing to having an actual agreement with Sound Transit that is actually going to fund the improvements on the Clover Creek Drive Pacific Highway rail crossing.
Yeah.
Where, to deal with the things over there. And I know that this committee has been at the forefront of urging to improve the safety of that for a long time. And we're finally getting to the point of where an actual commitment of some dollars from Sound Transit, and it's on the agenda for later. So wanted to pass that back to you, that it helps to be a squeaky wheel, because eventually people will pay attention.
See, Ray, you just gotta last long enough to see it come to fruition, right? Yeah,
I can add.
sure.
This is the first time I've been in one of these without Dr. Hart.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I was one of the early committee members also, and I look around, there's no Alan. He had all that archival knowledge stuff, and he was smart and he kept everything together. But I reintroduced at the last meeting. I was a realtor after I got out of the Army, and I had to do things for marketing, distinguish myself somehow. And somebody know I came through, even if it's for a bad reason, they at least knew I came through. So I brought up the idea of go to some of these things in town, and there's the citizens, most of which you never hear of, here as a committee. You know, we don't get anybody knocking on our door leaving notes saying,
right.
can you look into this or add a boy to the police or anything? I was disturbed by that, so I introduced the concept, why don't we have visibility and show up at some of these things, go to McGavin, go down, to
Mhm.
Summerfest, and somehow prod folks to say, what do you think about the cities? I'm on the public safety advisory, most of them don't know what that is.
Right.
So eventually, over a couple of months of being ignored or wondering if I was a pickpocket,
Yeah.
I got the previous city manager to work with me and the staff, and we got a logo that they would permit that I could put on the hat, jacket, a shirt,
Oh, great.
all of which I did.
Mm-hmm.
And that helped me. But unless you have some concept where you're gonna go out as a committee and dare to possibly interrupt the conversation, say, I'm Ray Dodson and I represent the people in the city's appointed committee. And how about anything, good news, bad news? What I promise you is I'll be a good messenger both directions.
Mm-hmm.
I may not agree with you, but you'll be assured it's gonna get there. You'll be assured to hear, you got a few cards up, which was good later, some of the months later would say, here's somebody I can drive past, so they got a card and call them. So that's cool anyway. But you have to find some visibility. We're coming out, I got the PC and BC, pre-COVID and after COVID. COVID closed up society. They don't move around as much as they did. They don't move around because of other events in our society, feeling very comfortable, which if I can just touch back to one of the questions, I think the Lakewood Police Department still leads, as far as I can tell, in the nearby area in predictable good. You may not like what happened, but you're gonna be treated fair and you're squared away. And I'm proud of that. I used to be a cop in LA and Northern California, so I have some insight in that. But I think if we can reach out, surveys are cool, but they gather certain kinds of information. All of them necessarily have a built-in target which says there's also a symbol with some ingredients that came from that. You kind of make it go the way you want. But something that allows contact, we got more and more societies open and more things from Liquid. Without being rude, somehow interject yourself into what's going on in a way which is digestible. Then build the confidence like I have in the police department that our committee continually have composition that would be good messengers of message. And councils here, since I've been here 3 years ago, have always been receptive to the ideas, formally and informally. So we have a lot of good things already on our side.
Yeah.
Great police department, hardworking city staff, city manager. I know that character from I was very present there. I've been a PSAC there for about 12 years. But I think somehow be able to go out without being a nuisance and genuinely solicit that input
Right.
It doesn't seem easy. Part of it, I think we are getting into this new society,
Yeah.
a different America.
Well, I think you all touch on a couple of things and I'll throw it out there. It seems like we can be helpful to provide the public safety sort of talking points of the month or of the quarter so that you have similar information to what we receive about the good things that are happening in terms of the crime stats going down. That would be helpful when you engage, in your everyday lives. And then when you have the opportunity to engage in a more structured way, whether it's a truck and tractor day or a neighborhood association meeting, I think something simple but visible, like name tags for you folks that we could create and say, member Public Safety Advisory Committee with your name on it. So that people would say, oh, there's someone I can talk to, or you're a person with some sort of knowledge that perhaps I can glean from or whatever. So those are simple little things we should be able to do that would make a difference, I think. Did you have something?
I did. I wanted to add on to that. Thank you, Mayor. I think you brought up a great point that could speak to a broader spectrum to all of our boards and commissions. We're always looking for for great people to get involved with any boards and commissions. So maybe this is something that is a little larger than that. It, of course, would have public safety, but then planning commission, parks, all of those things. And maybe it's those type of pop-up booths that are out that talk about that. And you guys are the ambassadors and the recruiting people to, hey, we would love for you to be a part of this boards and commission, and we get the information back. So I want to think a little broader than just public safety, which is
Yeah.
great. That's who we're talking to now. But I think it could be really applicable. So thank you. Really good for all of our boards and commissions and to get more people involved. Like you said, you take it back to us and city staff, good or bad. And we would like that for everything. So we'd have input on all of the areas of the city that we're looking for.
Really could be a more effective ambassador program is really what we're talking about, right? Yeah.
Something to think about, maybe we could work on something before truck and tractor that's coming up in October. When we do the booth there, it's not to sit behind, and just point out flowers. It's actually to engage the community. So
Absolutely.
maybe we could focus in partnership. I know you guys are gonna be talking later. Maybe we could ask just 3 or 4 questions of the community instead of focusing on a survey that would help support your data, or what are you guys really wanting to know from the community? We could ask those questions
Right.
and bring that back.
Part of it too, it's a good point, is being out there visible, interacting with the community, whether it's Summerfest or Truck and Tractor, all these events are opportunities for us to engage and to be enlightened, right? And so it may be helpful for us to come up with a little, like a doorbell piece or whatever you want to call it, that might say, did you know? And has data about public safety stuff that's going on in Lakewood or successes. So you could come up with your little name tag badge. I'm a member of the Public Safety Advisory Committee, and just say, hi, Susie, nice to see you. Here's some information you may not have known as a resident of Lakewood, but did you know? Boom, boom, boom. And then that might engender a conversation. What do you think about what's going on in Lakewood? What do you think we should do differently or more of? That kind of a thing. So giving you the tools to go out and actually be more successful and engaging and have fun doing it, frankly, it might be on us to do and create a little bit. You had something, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things that was very simple for me, I started the Lakewood Multicultural Coalition, and I had a flip chart with sticky notes. And the question was, what would you like to see in Lakewood? You're gonna get the responses from the people so to ask your questions. So that's a great idea.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
It works.
Okay.
Councilmember Lauricella.
Thank you, Mr.
We could-
Hi.
Hi.
First, I just want to say thank you guys so much for your work that you're doing for the community. As volunteers, you are what connects us to everyone else out there and keeps things moving. So being a part of a board or a commission in the city is a huge undertaking, and we recognize that. So thank you for all that you do. One thing that you mentioned is the sort of the dissolving of neighborhood associations and how we need to feed those to get them up and running again and get them the resources that they need. And I wonder if it's something that as a city, we can put more resources towards, even to have somebody who, I know we have Chris, but maybe even more resources to have leaders of those individual community groups that drive those meetings, at least until we can get volunteers from those neighborhoods to run them. I think that might be part of it is getting someone who's willing to step up and lead for their community like that in a volunteer position can be challenging. So sort of planting the seeds with city staff to get that rolling might be something to consider.
Give me a little bit more meat on that. What are you thinking specifically would be helpful?
Well, we had neighborhood associations that were actively meeting in North
Mhm.
Lakewood and Tillicum and Springbrook.
Yep.
Some of those have sort of died off. Could we dedicate a resource from the city to kick that meeting off again and lead and facilitate those meetings for those communities to help draw people in?
Got it. Other than Chris, you're saying,
Other than Chris, yeah.
or in addition to?
In addition to,
Yeah.
or if Chris has the resources to be at, 4 of those meetings a month, leading the charge and
Mhm.
rallying people, then that's fine, but I don't know that that's part of his current responsibilities.
Yeah, well, we should request some feedback about what the modus operandi is currently to revitalize those associations and find out what resources are lacking and what we may need to provide more of to achieve the result we all want, which is engagement, right? Good point.
Just things to think about how to get the community out to speak up on behalf of themselves. Because with volunteer positions, it takes really special people to take
Yeah.
on that role, which all of you are, and I appreciate it. So,
Well, it's tough because I think the deputy mayor went out. She was the designated person to go out to the Tillicum Neighborhood Association meeting last month, for instance. We're all appointed to go out, or scheduled, I should say, to go out to the various association meetings monthly. And sometimes there are people there and sometimes there are no people there. And so it's kind of a bummer when you go out and you plan your evening and no one shows up. So it's to your point, we got to figure out how to revitalize them perhaps a little bit better and figure out, what we need to do, whether, you can't say free beer, but maybe free coffee or cookies or something. Even my mayor's coffee house, it was a planning exercise to get off the ground to make sure that we had the resources there, a topic of interest, some incentive to come meet your neighbor and have a cup of coffee and a cookie or whatever. And that actually has gone fairly well. And the audience has grown a fair amount over the last year, I would say. And so maybe we look at that on a different scale in the neighborhood association. I know that's the intent. I'm not sure where we are currently. So it's a fair point. Mr. Branstetter.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, and I hear Commissioner Larcella's say that we should take a role of trying to re-energize these to do that. But, the history of some of these organizations is that they were formed not because the city wanted them necessarily, but because there was something going on. And so there was something in it for them to having a neighborhood association to be able to go and do that. I mean, you talk about the Northeast Association, there were like 12 or 13 properties that were full of junked cars. And then, but once we solved that problem and with code enforcement over multiple years, then they didn't feel any need to meet anymore because their immediate concern was done. So a part of us is not encouraging people to create and be involved in neighborhood associations, but we maybe need to market what can a neighborhood association do for you? Okay, as opposed to we know what we would like to get from a neighborhood association, but in order to get the people involved to be able to go and do that. And some of the neighborhood associations that are still in play, they have leadership that's been there for 10 years and those things, it's over there. And it's very hard to get those folks replaced.
Yeah.
Particularly in a period of time of when things are going fairly well.
Right.
Then people won't want to do that. So we maybe need to do a little bit of marking about why have a neighborhood association and what sort of things can a neighborhood get out of it rather than
Sure.
what would the city get out of you would be having a neighborhood association.
No, agreed. And that's probably a discussion beyond the scope of our subcommittee here tonight, but they would have a key role in imparting information at those association meetings. So I think we all understand that it's kind of a twofold deal. It's right. It's getting people to know one another in their neighborhoods, and it's imparting information both to and from, so that there's, you know, good flow and people feel like they're in the know, that they've got an ownership interest in their neighborhood, that they're being heard, and that they're receiving something by way of information that they may not otherwise know had they not attended, right? So there's some value there. Well, this has been good. And again, I echo all of our comments here in thanking you for your work and your participation. And we just appreciate it. And thank you for coming. And Ray, you know, you just need to do it another 20 years. So that'd be good.
Well, thank you for all the programs that you offer to the citizens. Again, I think, you know, holding a booth and being visible will allow the community to know about the Citizens Academy, the ride-alongs, as long as you don't have any felons.
Right, right.
And also about the CERT training coming up, like that's stuff that we're planning on promoting. And then especially about being proactive versus reactive with emergency events and showing people how to sign up for Code Red. So thank you for all those programs. They're amazing.
Absolutely. All right, well, keep up the good work and thanks. And we got you back in time to tune in to the Bachelorette at 8. So you should be good. Yeah.
Watching that.
Me
You?
and my kids and my daughters, yeah, they love those crazy shows.
I watch it a couple times.
It is funny. Yeah, no, it's a comic relief, right?
I need to, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, next we have a review of the 2025-26 council goals and priorities. And to help us lead through the discussion, we've got Mr. Vargas, our assistant to the city manager. And apparently Mr. Caulfield, the actual city manager, who apparently is a character from University Place.
Also, Chief Smith will be joining us as well. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Just as a matter of introduction, a bit of a recap. So the council held a goal-setting retreat back in March. We had a subsequent follow-up meeting on May 28th to identify and prioritize goals for the upcoming biennium for 2025 and 2026 that ultimately serves as the underlying foundation for that particular budget biennium. In your packet is a draft proposal that has been prepared by Mr. Vargas and has done a very nice job in pulling this together. And as a follow-up from your May 28th meeting, there was really two goals that the council focused on. First of all, the goal 1, and these are ranked in priority. This was based on a numbering exercise that you went through back in March. Goal number 1 is the downtown park and looking out into the future, the planning and ultimately development of a multi-generational community center, followed by goal 2, public safety, followed by goal 3, which was originally focused on Edgewater Park. However, City Council decided to pivot a little bit there and focus on a little bit more broader areas, including Edgewater Park and some other park improvements, and calling it parks and lake access. And then the 4th goal, the continuation of the focus on economic development, specifically within our 2 sub areas, the downtown and the Lakewood Station area. The major changes from your last discussion really focuses around first public safety. And the feedback that we heard from the council was that you wanted goals and achievable outcomes really focused on metrics. So the chief and his staff developed what is presented to you here this evening, which is a focus on community engagement and community-based policing, followed by a focus on reducing crime and victimization, also reducing traffic collisions, the increased use of technology in policing, which Chief Smith has been exceptional, quite frankly, during his tenure with the city in bringing forth various tools. Enhancing police officer wellness as well as training, and some other goals, the continuation of the strong safety net that the city has in support of those in need, which goes back to incorporation. And then also evaluating and if feasible, municipal court operations from in-house to contracted services. So that's the overview of that particular goal. Goal 3, which again originally started as Edgewater Park, has again kind of pivoted to this parks and lakes access focus, starting with Edgewater Park and the implementation of that. And you can see in your packet that that is a multi-year process in terms of being able to secure the funding, doing the design, the permitting, and then ultimately the construction. The other area that the council is really keen on is a street end pilot project. There are a number of street ends on several lakes here in the city that the council would like to make improvements to. This 2025-26 would be the first year. PRAB will be coming forth with a recommendation to the council for your consideration in the coming months on what the first one should be. From a process standpoint, 2025 would be really the design, permitting, as well as the community outreach. And then 2026 would actually be the construction. The other project included in here is Camp Murray boat launch improvements. The city council appropriated $100,000 in ARPA funds earlier this year to partner with Camp Murray to make improvements down on their boat launch at American Lake Park. Not just for the public, but also, as you're aware, both police and fire use that as their headquarters for their marine services units. And so the discussion with Camp Murray on that has been going well. They do have some steps to go through, not just with their agencies, but other state agencies. We are hopeful that we'll have an MOU sometime later this year that will then be able to move forward with developing the master plan for future improvements down there in the 25-26 time period. And then any future actual improvements would occur in future bienniums, dependent upon the city going out and securing the capital funds, just like we are doing in the process of Edgewater Park right now, and in the last couple of bienniums that we did for Wards Lake and for American Lake Park, and prior to that, Harry Todd Park. And then the last one, kind of an emerging item, is the interlocking bridge, and essentially having a discussion with the community and evaluating different options there as it relates to the future of that bridge. And so those are the major changes that we heard from council, again, as part of your follow-up discussion on May 28th. And again, certainly, let's Chief or Mr. Vargas, if you have anything to add, we'll turn it over to the council. And our goal and objective here this evening is to get your final blessing on this, and then we would bring this back for your consideration and adoption at your next regular meeting next Monday evening.
I'll start off with a softball. I talked to the manager a little bit about this today, and it's probably implicit in goal 1, which is the downtown parks. As part of our downtown sub-area plan, we certainly had a downtown park considered as part of that. We also had the linear sort of Green Street loop, or whatever you want to call the thing, that has been, at least for planning purposes, funded by the RAISE grant from Congress to the tune of 1.2. My only question is not to beat a dead horse, but whether there's some value in putting some identification in here about at least the planning design portion of it. Because I know we're doing it already. We're kind of engaged. I don't know exactly how we're engaging, but I wonder if it would be of value under phase 2 that talks about the development of the downtown master plan park, incorporating multi-generational recreational activities and gathering spaces, walking and connector pathways and seating areas, including those that may be identified or generated on the Green Street Loop or whatever you want to call that. But at least it calls attention to the fact that we're in it. And I think
to me, there's value to that because it is part of the linear park for the downtown sub-area plan. That was really what we were considering before we thought about, you know, the recent acquisition. My thoughts. Any thoughts there?
I like it.
Mr. Pearson and then Mr. Branstad?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I'm generally in agreement with that. I do like the way that this goal is laid out in phases.
Yep.
Because I think one of the challenges when we met to just come up with the goals is that as a group, we were thinking differently in terms of the phasing. Some of us were trying to phase things, so we were sort of saying, well, only do a little bit in 25, 26, and this moves it out to where it is, and it makes it look very doable. If I was going to just tweak phase 2, all I would say is develop a downtown master, and I would change park to parks with the parenthetical S or that over there. And we intend to have at least 2, one linear park and one Reggie Park, and maybe
linear
more.
park, yeah.
So to be able to go and do that. But I think it's good to have a goal that is not constrained to just something can we do it in 2 years? Okay, when we know the answer is no.
Right.
But with that, we can get started and we know where we're going and there's a very logical order to it.
Right.
So I kind of like the way the goal is set up that way. To be able to do that, and it allows for some flexibility, particularly with respect to depending upon which real estate we're able to actually acquire ownership or use of.
The only other question on the phasing that I was noodling over is the chicken and the egg thing. Do you plan and design and then acquire the land to meet the plan and design? Or do you acquire and then kind of noodle over what the plan and design will be for what you've acquired?
I think you have, I think you conceptualize what all you would like to have, which we have done. We've got all these things over there. Then you acquire pieces of real estate that then you have to plan and design to put those concepts on the ground. And that's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah, I think we all kind of get where we want to end up with, right? We want to have a vibrant downtown that's got parks. Mr. Caulfield.
So comment and a suggestion regarding the RAISE grant. The comment is that's part of your current goals and we've achieved it. We have received the funding to move forward with the planning element of that project. Also, that project, first and foremost, is a transportation project as it relates to our downtown sub-area plan.
But
Now,
non-motorized, right?
but an outcome
Yeah.
will be a part of it.
Yeah.
So my suggestion would be that it be a bullet point as part of goal number 4 under the sub-area planning process, because I think that's really where it belongs. I don't see how it really fits into goal 1 with the downtown park, which is really a separate standalone initiative. So my recommendation would be if that's
Put it
something
there.
you want to continue moving forward, that it should be included as part of the downtown sub-area.
I'm fine with that. I just want to definitely put some attention to it so it's called out.
Also, we are beginning to have conversations about that project, and it could take upwards of 3 years for that to all come together, just given the size, scope, and work that needs to be done on that. So that would be a 25, 26, and even into 27. Would like to get it done sooner, but that's a big lift project in terms of what the outcomes are, because it's going to get us to 30%.
Yeah, it is a big lift project. It would be kind of nice to at least have a 30,000-foot overview of what we think we want out of that.
Actually, you're going to get more than a 30,000-foot overview. You're going to get about a 5,000-foot overview because, again, it'll be to 30%.
Pretty quickly, huh?
Not pretty quickly. It's going to take quite a while to get. It's going to take at least 2 years to get there. there's a lot of work. This is not something that just comes off the shelf. There's a lot of analysis and studies and such that needs to be done for this. It's $1.1 million.
No, I get it. I'm just hoping that we, and I'm sure we will be actively engaged in some of that process, because as I sit here today, if someone were to ask me, what areas are you considering for the Green Street Loop for which the RAISE grant is going to be used for planning purposes? I wouldn't necessarily be able to tell them with particularity.
Yeah, again, so that would be all part of the process, Mayor.
Yeah.
Again, we're just in the infantile stages of pulling this together, but what I
Yeah.
can tell you is that this is going to be a big, it's a big deal for the city, number one,
Yeah.
to receive this funding. But the process, the public process included, is going to be pretty significant, and it's
Okay,
not something
good.
that will happen overnight. It will take some time.
Right.
Just
Okay.
trying to manage expectations.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yep. Okay, any other comments on, do you want to go through these one by one and the goals? But I think goal one, you seem to have some consensus with the language on that and the phasing. Anything else on goal one? You guys good with that? Goal two, since we have our chief here, any thoughts on that, Mr. Branstetter?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, as I've gone through and read this, I would actually take goal two out of this document. That, unlike the other three goals, there's not a lot of new things to focus on. This is the goal that is sort of worded like continue to focus and keep moving in the positive direction that we have been moving on in public safety. And we emphasized, first of all, further up in the document where there was a question about commitment, that we're going to maintain our commitment to things, and safety, public safety is mentioned as what we're going to do. And the specific things in this goal are all things that are already ongoing. There's not a new initiative in here that we need to look to go and do that. And so I think it's sort of, we emphasize public safety in a variety of ways to include a very robust percentage of the general fund budget, and do things. We talk about it consistently, but the things that are here are, the goal really reads very much like continue to do what we're doing and continue to make progress in the direction that we are making progress. And so I don't think that that's what this particular document is meant to emphasize. And I would take this out, leaving just the other three goals to be able to go and keep it in the commitment statement about do that, or maybe if you want to strengthen the, from a public's, there, but it just reads differently in that it's, I'm not comfortable with having a goal that is continue to march in the direction that we're going. And so that's not to de-emphasize public safety, but it's in terms of the purposes of this document, I would take goal two out.
Mr. Pearson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I disagree with taking it out of the goals, because I think when you're looking at the council goals or you're on the website and there's, you know, the four main bullet points that you really want to stand out, and someone looks at it and says, wow, they really want to focus on a downtown park. They're really keen on public safety. They want to increase access to lakes, and they want to, you know, revitalize the downtown. And I think that hits all of the key points that came out of our retreat. And I understand that it's an old goal, you know, that everyone's always working towards. But some folks don't focus on it as much as others. And I think that it's really important to showcase that we are focusing on it more than other communities maybe. So it's not that it's, you know, it's a different goal. I completely agree. But it's also a really important one to kind of keep up at the forefront. in my opinion, to keep up there that we're focusing on it, we're emphasizing it. You know, we're putting money towards these things with the flock systems and we're, you know, looking into new technologies for different things. So that's just kind of my, you know, when you quickly scroll through the you know, the council goals and things, and those things kind of tend to pop. And so I think it's an important thing to pop and not be buried in the commitments. So thank you.
Councilmember Bell?
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Councilmember Pearson on this. I do see that under commitment, it says ensuring a safe city, which to me is public safety. So I see that as a commitment, but I like to see public safety pulled out in a goal as number 2. And there are some tangible things for public safety, like there was something tangible, reduce crime fight by X amount of %, you know, work on the data-driven approaches. So there's some things in there that are new. So as far as what you're saying, but yes, a lot of it is a continued support. So I am for keeping public safety in as a goal.
Mr. Boki?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I understand what Councilmember Branstetter is saying. That the one thing that jumps out at me though in goal 2 is to increase community-based policing. I don't know that our emphasis as a police force has been on community-based policing. So I might change that. The language in that whole paragraph is a little nebulous, but I think it clearly, it states anyway, maybe not as clearly as I would like it, that we are going to increase community-based policing. And I like that part. I think it's a change for this city. And I'm looking forward to that. So I guess from that standpoint, I'm okay with it staying in there. I understand Councilmember Branstetter's point that it is a core function of what we do rather than an add-on like the other things are. Hey, we want to build a downtown park. Hey, we want to have a police force. You know, there is that element, right? It's we do this every day. We commit a large portion of our budget to it. But I think it does put the focus on some things that we probably have needed to put the focus on in our community. And it ties in with some things we were just talking about in the last presentation. Yeah. So, and reducing traffic collisions, which is great. And there's a lot of emphasis on that now in a lot of sectors coming out of various things that have gone on in this country for a while. Yeah, I can live with 2 as it says.
So and I'll get to the deputy mayor. My thought is perhaps we need to tweak the title because it's as the manager indicated, we're already doing the Green Street Loop thing. It shouldn't be necessarily a goal because it's already part of our work plan. Same with public safety. But if we said something like enhance community-based policing and public safety results or something like that, that would be more of a goal, I think. Because public safety is what we're doing. It's our business already. Deputy Mayor, do you have something on that?
Yeah, thank you. And I do understand Mr. Branstetter's comments, but to me, if we don't have something to show that we are focused on our safety, the public is going to question even if this crimes are going down. If there's a crime, they're still going to question because they don't see anything to say we are focusing on our safety. So I'm okay with the safety goal staying there.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I too appreciate what Councilmember Branstetter stated, that yes, public safety has been a focus. It will continually be a focus. It's something that our city was founded around. We are grateful for our police force and all the work that they do. But I also agree with what Mr. Pearson and Ms. Bell and the rest of the council has said. I think because it is such a high visibility topic. And because it is a large portion of our city's funding, it's a large portion of what we do. I think it's critical that we keep it at the forefront and call it out as a goal. And I really appreciate the measurable pieces of it that are in the breakdown in here, as ways to see how we're doing in all of it. So I don't know that I would change the title. I think just calling it out as public safety is simple for folks to understand. And then all the meat behind it is in the details of how we measure it and what we're doing. So I like it as written. Thank you.
So assuming it sounds like we have consensus to keep goal 2 as is, are there any internal particulars in this draft that you would tweak, add to, take away from, or want to hear from the chief on? I want to take advantage of his time since he is gracious enough to be here tonight. Thank you, Chief. You want to give us a little thought process on what flew into the creation of the articulated goals here?
Yes, so when I wrote these goals, I wrote them directly to the citizens of the city because I think it's important that they know exactly what we're doing and how we're going to go about doing it. The first part is primarily about community-based policing. While that was an underlying goal, it was never something specifically stated, channeled to our officers and letting them know what the expectation is of them. And it also correlates to the last part of our goals where it focuses on our officers as well. So there are certain things in here that were never mentioned before. And as I go down, we talk about community-based policing, we talk about building trust, we talk about going to community groups in schools. We've already started much of this earlier this year. Right now, we're working with the school district, the YMCA, and the police department, having basketball games and things of that nature at the Y with our students. So there's a lot of things that we are doing and setting the expectation for our officers, but also letting our citizens know what we're doing individually.
Absolutely, yeah.
But if businesses are looking for a place to come, then they can look at our goals and see exactly what our police department is doing, what they can expect from our police department. And in going further down in the reduction of crime, we want to make sure that we always have a 5% or 10% reduction in crime. But the most important part that's never been stated is the reduction in fear of victimization. You can reduce crime all you want, but if the citizens simply don't feel safe in your city, you have not accomplished anything. And so that ties into the first part of it where we are doing citizens academies, we're doing ride-alongs, community groups, and we want to focus on all of the groups that we possibly can and also create as many as we can. Then we want to make sure that we're effectively solving crime, just like we were focused last year on our homicides. We had 5 in our city, and we were able to solve all of them with 100% effective rate of solve rate. And from time to time, you guys may hear from citizens about traffic collisions and speeding in the community. We want to make sure that we have a system for tracking that. We have a system for addressing it. We're using all the emphasis that we can in combating crime and reducing reducing traffic collisions, specifically hit and runs and things of that nature that may impact our citizens. And as we look forward to the future, right now, we've managed to tackle the very first goal that I had when I got here, and that was getting our required number of officers working in the field to address crime and reduce our response rate. So we wanted to make sure that we're addressing the various parts of the community, bringing in new technology, and not just Flock, but other things. For one, secondarily, technology that will help us in addressing our calls for service, not just sending the responsible unit, but sending the closest unit.
so that we can reduce our response time to calls for service. But the other part that we never talk about is we have effective training. We talk about our wellness, but we also want to support our officers and what they do, implementing best practices, making sure that we have timely communication as to what's going on in the city. We're sharing information, and we're also tracking down those that need to be. But we also want to increase our officers' mental health training, focus on their individual wellness, promote and encourage a positive work environment, wellness within the environment. And so what we were trying to do was to make sure that we address all of the areas that citizens may have concerns about and things that the community would have concerns about, and letting them know that as a department, we hear you. And we're working on those goals.
I was just thinking out loud with Councilmember Bell, is there some value in including a bullet point on either the community engagement line item or the other public safety goals on increasing the participation of residents in Code Red? Is there a value to doing that? Making sure that more people have more access to information through whatever engagement we do out there, whether it's the Summerfest booths or.
So
We can include Code Red, but that's kind of interwoven into what we're doing as far as the regular community meetings, the survey gatherings, the concerns and suggestion, open dialogue, partnerships. And so we want to make Code Red a part of that. Yeah, yes.
I mean,
we
that's
can.
affirmatively getting people to sign up for something, right? So that they receive timely responses.
Absolutely.
I think that might be a decent part of that. Any other thoughts? Mr. Branstetter?
Well, I appreciate all the comments. I would just say that in maintaining this goal is recognize that this is a city council goal. Okay, to be able to go and do that. And I would refer back to our conversations with the PSAC. Okay, where so under the section for reduced crime and fear of victimization, okay, I think that while there is, it says increased public safety education and prevention measures for residents, I think something stronger should be there. I mean, I think we talked about really wanting to push information out to folks about that is really designed to make them understand that they're safer, and that they're doing that. So a stronger statement there, about, in addition to doing all the things to reduce crime, is how to market our successes in reducing crime to people. It would be something that I think that we would want to do.
I agree with that.
Okay. The other thing, if we're going to maintain this goal I mean, that one thing that is missing here is one of the things that has been key to our recent significant reductions in crime. Okay. And that is a commitment to maintaining the staffing level of the department. We talked about that was one of the factors that caused us to become better and reduce crime, to be able to go and do that. And so somewhere in here, there should be a council goal that we're going to maintain the staffing level of the department at authorized levels. We had this a period of time, 4 years ago, where it eroded, okay, and it was a budget thing. And so if it's going to be a major goal, I would sort of like to see that added in here, that we have a commitment to the full staffing level.
So we do talk about it in the preamble, right? We talk about investing in people, but I agree, you could have a first bullet under focus on community engagement to increase community-based policing. It could be maintain a full complement, or whatever you want to say, of
Fully staffed, you know.
fully staffed department to accomplish the
Yeah.
goals of community-based policing or whatever.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
I'd be careful making,
Because you commit to a budget at that point.
correct, you're
I
making
get
a
it.
budget. Yeah. That's all I'd
Yeah.
say. I mean,
Although it doesn't put down a number, doesn't
doesn't.
commit to 97
Yeah.
FTEs or 102
Yeah,
FTEs.
Yeah,
Just says full staff.
but I would just say, you leaving yourself an out is not the same as having a goal of saying, this is what we're going to do then, and what it speaks to it. I mean, if this
Yeah.
is that important that we're gonna put it as a goal, then we should be able to say, okay, that's it, and essentially then that becomes guidance to the city manager as he instructs budget to
Yeah.
to put that on the top of the list.
Sounds a little watered down, but if you want to, we could use some language to that effect, you know, appropriately allocate resources to ensure success in community-based policing or something to that effect. Yeah.
It's adequately staffed to achieve the rest of the
Yeah,
stuff
yeah.
on this page.
Yeah. I think they can wordsmith it, but they get the point. Yeah. No numbers for Mr. Boki's edification. Don't commit to an FTE. Yeah. Well, good. Well, thank you, Chief, for the explanation and the work that you put into this. It sounds like we're gonna honor that discussion point we had and keep that as a goal, because it is, while ever present on our minds, it's something that the public looks to as a major municipal service. Okay, how about goal number 3? Anything on that? We need to add, delete, or discuss? I think we're probably pretty good there. Yes, sir.
Do we want to specifically call out the shorelines on Lakewood's 3 largest lakes? Call out American Stilicho and Gravely?
I don't know what you want to do with that, other, because we're already gonna have a conversation about the shoreline master program with the comp plan amendments coming up. I don't know, I mean, what other goal would we have other than?
I just want to make sure we have some messaging around providing access to Gravely Lake, something that we can refer to.
Well, I think we could certainly be more specific, but you do have this street end pilot project here.
Mhm.
That, you know, obviously they've got 2 street ends on Gravely, and I haven't heard from PRAB yet exactly what they're talking about now. It seems like it changes every decade, but,
Mhm.
you know, we had the 1992 study, then we had the other one, and now we got something else, but whatever. you know.
I did go to the last, or listen to the last PRAB meeting, and Gravely Lake did not make the top of the list. So I think it might be important to let our community know that we do hear what the rest of the community is saying
Mhm.
in terms of access to all 3 of the major lakes.
Yep,
But open to discussion for sure.
Mr. Branstetter.
Yeah, I rather like the way that it's worded now, that, you know, we specifically focused on real opportunities that we see that we've already actually started investing in, or have done work on. But it does say that as a theme, we're looking to citywide expand overall access for folks to be able to go and do that. And I don't think we have to get down to specific bodies of water, you know, I don't mean to list Barlow Pond, but we wanted to buy a lot.
Right.
And the things to do that, you know, and I do agree, I do want to keep looking for ways to make some progress on Gravely Lake, but as we've discovered this year, that's not easy, and so I wouldn't want to put something in here that was very specific that not got a clear vision of a road to success like the rest of this is. My other thought on this particular thing here is that I just wanted to clarify what the interlock and bridge section says. Because it says that in 2025 is when we're going to do some evaluating.
Right.
In terms of being able to go and do that. And to me, and I think correctly, it infers that next month, when the bridge is repaired, we're going to reopen it in the manner that it was, but that we're committed in 2025 to looking at that. But not going to rush to a decision in the next 30 days
Right.
to do something, but that we've got a plan to look at it. That both tells the folks that have offered alternatives that we've heard that alternatives should be considered, but it also is not going to say, well, we're just going to maintain a detour for 18 months.
Right.
So I like the way that it's worded because it gives us the appropriate amount of time to really look at that while recognizing that it may be an asset in a variety of ways if some changes were made.
I agree with that. And I think that at least the folks that I've chatted with in the neighborhood would be pleased to see this on the goals and objectives for this time frame. And I know while they're separate, completely separate projects, it is helpful to me that 2025 is the time frame that we would be looking at this, because that's the same time frame we're going to be in design for Mount Tacoma. And to me, they connect differently. I get it, but it is at least a planning time frame that makes sense. So anything else on that? Mr. Pearson?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I agree with all of Mr. Brandsetter's comments on that. I think it's well spoken, and I think those are important points that he raised that we're, kind of keeping on the forefront here.
On the bridge or on the other pieces there? Yep, great. Sure.
On the interlock and bridge section, just in what's written here, to me, it appears that both the bullet points sort of cover the same content, and I wonder if they could be combined, because they both talk about evaluating future options that include so-and-so, right? So one's evaluate future options, one's conduct a feasibility study to evaluate future options. And I think it's a little repetitive.
That would be fine by me if it makes sense to incorporate those concepts.
And then my other thought was on the street ends pilot project, whether we want to put a parenthetical S around there just in case we have the capacity to do multiple street ends in 2025, giving us the option instead of just locking into one.
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. Ends plural.
Yeah. And updating the verbiage belowhand to reflect that as well, right? Making it a plural option instead of singular. And that's it. Thank you.
That makes good sense. Anything else on that? On goal number 3, good work. Goal number 4. It read well to me. I think Mr. Caulfield already indicated that they'll include some language about the raised grant planning process for the Green Street Loop, the non-motorized transportation modal work in goal number 4. Yep.
So we call out the 2 sub-area plans of downtown and Liquid Station. We recently, a few weeks ago, talked about sub-areas for Tillicum and Woodbrook as well. Is that something we want to include as we talk about revitalization, or do we want to limit it to just these 2 sub-areas?
Well, it's a little bit up to us and certainly the manager in terms of whether the work plan can accommodate that. But I think when you talk about economic growth, you're talking more about the commercial areas and the residential areas that we've identified for targeted housing. We haven't really done that for Tillicum. We don't have identified housing or employment targets for Tillicum. Wouldn't you say on that?
I actually don't think that we are at the point with Tillicum where the focus on Tillicum is growth in terms of jobs in
Right.
the same way
Yeah.
that it is for the other two
Downtown,
sub
yeah.
areas. I mean, to be really honest, we're still a month away from approving a revised Tillicum sub-area plan.
Right.
So I think, maybe down the road when we really look at getting a vision, but we still haven't finalized what we want to do. So I think for right now, I would leave
Yep.
Tillicum out of this section.
I agree.
The only thing in tweak that I would make in this is there's a bullet about like the sixth bullet down in, it says Lakewood Station, so, and I think it says, when it says there, it says Lakewood Transit sub area, and I think it remains consistent
Oh, right.
with Lakewood Station.
Yeah, good catch. Because the second bullet says Lakewood Station, so, yep. Anything else on that? I think that makes good sense. As is, thank you for the work on that. So that takes us through the goals, and I assume that whatever minor modifications will be made, so they'll be ready for us to review and adopt at the next regular session.
That's correct, Mayor. We'll see if we can get it all updated for this next Monday. If not, it'll be the next regular meeting, which will be your first meeting in September.
That works. Thank you, Mr. Vargas. Good work. Thank you, Chief, for coming and certainly for the excellent work on that, putting that together. Okay, so the next and well, not last, I guess, it's the comprehensive plan periodic review. Let's take a 5-minute recess.
to the painless process of comprehensive plan periodic review.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Tiffany Spear, Planning Division Manager for Planning and Public Works. So we've been here before, but tonight's focus is going to be on the development regulation side of this huge package that is the 2024 periodic review of Lakewood's comprehensive plan and development regulations. So just a refresher on the schedule where we sit. The first study session was held July 22nd, and that covered the plan and policy issues, including the sub-area plans as well as the comp plan itself. And then we did spend a little bit of time on housing just because that is the top issue for this decennial update. Tonight, we're focusing on regulations, but we are also focusing on a couple of items that you asked for specific information about or recommendations about from the Planning Commission, including the Downtown Transportation Mitigation Fee Program, regulation and authority or allowance of short-term rentals in residential areas throughout the city, critical area versus shoreline regulations in the city, and then just an overview, which I'll breeze through pretty quickly, of other chapters that are being updated in our Lakewood Municipal Code. Next week is the first public hearing, and it will be on the entire package under both of those study sessions. And then the week following, so August 26th, you're scheduled at this point to have another study session where if there's anything specific you would like responses on from staff, we would bring that to you on the 26th, but then also discussion of any comments that are received on August 19th in writing or live. Then there will be a second public hearing on September 3rd, which is the Tuesday after Labor Day. The 9th of September, the following Monday, is a second study session, just kind of as a final conversation by you about what you've heard in both of those public hearings, any questions you have, and perhaps discussion of potential amendments to the package. And then at this point, you are scheduled to take action on September 16th. And the way it'll be brought to you is in 3 separate ordinances. One will be plans and policies, one will be development regulations, and then there will be a third separate regulation ordinance, a separate regulating ordinance, for the downtown sub-area plan related specifically to the master plan community size and location where those are allowed in the downtown. So I'll touch base on that a little bit later in this evening as well. And, oops, there it is. Okay, so again, we talked about plan and policy last week or last time. The comprehensive plan itself, which has been completely reorganized, it's got updated goals and policy language. It has an updated land designation map and zoning map. And there is a number of additional new background documents and appendices that are now included with that. There's a brand new Tillicum Woodbrook sub-area plan. There are changes to both the downtown and the Station District sub-area plan. And then there's the regulations, which we'll talk about tonight. So it's ranging from the critical areas ordinance, specifically regarding riparian area buffers in particular, but there's some other changes too. There's the codification of the Shoreline Master Program, which has been a standalone document since 2019 when it was adopted, but we're going to pull it into the actual Lakewood Municipal Code for ease of access for everyone who needs to refer to it. There are new chapters and definitions included in Title 17, which is regarding land subdivision. And then there's a number of changes, of course, in our general development regulation chapters, which are 18A, B, and C. And then again, that idea of the short-term rental regulation. But there's also a couple of new things coming in on short-term rentals we'll talk about. And then public noticing regulations. This was a bill that was adopted this year by the state legislature that the city needs to respond to. So to begin with, the transportation mitigation fee, and this was brought to you actually a little bit earlier this year as well as part of the downtown sub-area review in 2024. But as a reminder and focusing specifically on the TMF, it was adopted as an incentive to bring development into the sub-area. And the intent behind it was to eliminate individual projects having to do traffic analysis, which was both savings of time and money. It was adopted as a program where half of the cost of identified transportation projects would come from these private fees and the other half would come from public sources. So it was never intended that the TMF fees from development would cover all of the costs of the identified projects needed. The idea is that you're looking at a particular use, be it coming into a remodeled space or being new construction, to take a look at what type of traffic it generates in the quote peak PM hour, which is basically 4 to 5 PM or 5 to 6 PM. And then having to then calculate based on the cost of anticipated transportation projects, how much that particular development would need to pay based on the fee for trip that's been calculated. There was a list of additional 6-year TIP projects specific to downtown that were added back in 2018. So there had already been a list that were located in the downtown, but then a number of other projects were added because of the downtown sub-area plans for growth, both jobs and housing. The cost for the TMF projects identified for the downtown was a total of about $29 million. And so half of that, meaning half being paid by private development or the other half being paid by public sources, was about $14,472. These are 2018 dollars. So these have not been updated and are obviously pretty much obsolete 6 years after the fact. Just as was mentioned a few moments ago by the city manager, when you were talking about your goals, the RAISE planning grant that Lakewood received this year is going to be the source of information to help update all of these projects, not only if these are still the projects to identify, but also what their costs would be. And so while these numbers and these projects are listed right now, that may well change once we get the planning report out of the RAISE funds. And we do expect to have that by the end of 26 or into early 27 for your consideration. So again, the calculation of the TMF is based on the fact that there were that $28,945,000 in estimated costs for all of those projects, half of that. And then the projected housing and job growth totaled a number of 6,658 trips. That meant a fee per peak hour trip of $2,174. That is where the basic TMF fee came from. Then when an actual project comes in, the first question is what type of use is it? Is it commercial, residential, mixed use, or something else? And also again, how many vehicle trip ends do you do in that PM peak hour time between 4 and 6 PM? Couple of examples just to demonstrate this is in and of itself, the program is very straightforward. It is based on 1,000 square foot facility of whatever kind, and then you alter the final calculation of fee per trips by the actual square footage. So for a daycare facility, that is 11.12 cars into the PM peak hour. You multiply that by your fee per trip, and there's your number. And then you multiply that by the footage, square footage of the actual facility. Same calculations there for a drive-through coffee stand. Obviously, that is intended to be a drive-through facility, so the trips are higher than would be at a daycare facility. And so the cost for this fee would be higher. And same thing again for a general office building, a lower rate for that particular use per 1,000 square foot. So you would be taking a look at that and multiplying it by the square footage of the building to come up with your final number. What changed, what was predicted to come out of the TMF program was an administrative policy that was adopted in early 2019, in response to city council concerns about the amount of the TMF for certain types of development. So under this administrative policy and what's been in place since early 2019 is that nonprofit or temporary uses do not pay TMFs at all. Secondly, an applicant gets a credit against dedications to improvements and offsite construction linked to a project that would be considered eligible for TMFs. Third, no time limit was made on how long ago the comparison in an existing structure to the number of trips generated by the last use compared to the new one when deciding how much they would need to pay. So rather than many programs out there where there's a certain time limit back that you go, here it was If a building was standing as early as incorporation and there was a use in it at that time, there hasn't been since, we're still going to compare traffic back that far to now. And then the other thing was there was no, you pay all of your trips. It was just the change if you paid only for those additional trips on top of what was there however long ago. As a result, only about 0.5% of the estimated total costs for the downtown projects identified in the sub-area planning process has been collected. It's about 1%. Excuse me, yes, it's about 1% of the private share, and it's about 10% of what could have been collected without the administrative policy. So under the policy, it's a total of about 122,000. If you did not have that policy in place based on the development that's come into the sub-area plan to date, you would have been up to almost 1.1 million. And then there have also been no funds set aside at this point on the public side for any of the transportation costs. The other note for the TMF program is that the city has to return unused TMF fees after 10 years to the current owner of the property. We are about 5 years, almost 6 years into this program. So within a few years, TMFs will have to start getting returned. So the Planning Commission, at your request, provided a recommendation on a couple of items. First, recognizing and recommending that the current program is not working and that it needs to change immediately, and then perhaps at a higher level a few years down the road once some background work has been done. Secondly, the recommendation was rather than lose that 121.7 that you've collected to date in a couple of years to having to return it, credit that toward the installation of the intersection at Gravely Lake Drive and Avondale, which was identified in the sub-area plan. The cost for that is obviously more than the 121,730. In 2018, it was estimated to be 1.17 million, but that would need to be recalculated, of course, given the amount of time. But that is your Planning Commission's recommendation to you. So there's some options for the council regarding the TMF program and what to do now versus in the future. And these kind of go from minimal to really substantive change to the program itself. First of all, is simply change the administrative policy. And there's some suggestions here, things like rather than going back as far as city's been in place to perhaps going back to when the TMF program was established in 2019, or it could be another deadline date that you would select. Secondly, how long can a space remain vacant and still have credit of those past trips? So maybe only 12 months, which is a common time frame for many programs. Third would be potentially reducing or exempting certain uses, whether you want to keep doing that or stop doing that or adding more. Another option for you to consider is change the project cost share between public and private sources. Right now, it's 50-50, but you as a council can set that at any percentage share that you would like. A third, more substantive proposed idea here is to actually replace the TMF program with something else. So it could be looking at reliance on construction grants in the future, be it the RAISE construction grant that the city can pursue once the planning work is done. It could be other general government funds. It could be state or regional transportation grants, although first to say those are unlikely to be a funding source for the types of improvements that the city would like to make. Or there could be a citywide traffic impact fee assessed. And this department certainly recognizes that the city does not have impact fees now, but that is an option for transportation funding in the future. And then probably the most substantive or aggressive way to address the need for concurrency in the downtown sub-area, because that is really the underlying Growth Management Act policy we're trying to address here, is take a look at the current levels of service for the downtown transportation structure and actually change the levels of service. The authority is there for the council to do so, meaning you could say, we are at this level of congestion on road X right now. If all of this growth comes in as planned, it's going to be at a different level of congestion, and that's okay. We'd recognize that, and that's okay. The other way to do it is to say, we don't want to have a worse congestion. And so what we're going to actually do is until the construction of road improvements are complete, we are not going to allow any more development. So those are two pretty, again, I'll call it severe options. So again, back to change the administrative policy to encourage additional collection right now, changing the split of public and private, looking at maybe something other than the TMF program, at least as it's designed, because it could certainly be redesigned, or this idea of approaching it from a concurrency standpoint.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Spear. And before we go across these options, I think the one basic concern about the TMF had to be, it was intended to serve as an incentive because then developers weren't going to have to do these traffic surveys and things to do that. But we're not fully satisfied with the pace of redevelopment. And so the question really is this an incentive or is it actually a disincentive? And I hear both sides of that when I want to get feedback from people in the public who are thinking about doing some kind of development, and then they change the kind of development because of this and going on. So did the Planning Commission look at the incentive versus disincentive question with respect to this program?
Yes, and the information that the department was able to gather just from their own interaction with the public is that there has not been a project that specifically walked away from the downtown because of this fee. There may be have been a number of other reasons why in conjunction with other things, they decided not to come into Lakewood, but we were unable to identify a project where the developer at least told city staff, we're not going to pursue this because of this transportation mitigation fee.
So you said term walked away. I guess there's a question of, are there, I get the sense that there are projects that people didn't even approach. They didn't even get to the point of considering it because when they looked at it, doing all that, or they looked at comparing this sub area to the Station District sub area and that this was going off over there. So, but what you're saying is the Planning Commission determined that they didn't think it was a disincentive, but that if it could be tweaked primarily to raise more money by adjusting the administrative policy or some of the percentages involved.
Yes, sir. If you were to immediately change that administrative policy, additional funds would come in to the tune of 10 times as much as has so far. Because what has happened under the administrative policy is most projects don't pay anything at all. And if the administrative policy wasn't there giving credit as far back as the beginning of the city and those types of things, those projects would have had to pay. So the next slide, I think, is what it is. Yes, the city recommendation is actually to go ahead with directing a change to the administrative policy or doing away with it altogether. And then maybe the council considers changing the split in the public-private share should you wish to do so, but not to move forward with any of the more aggressive changes to the actual substantive program or looking at it from a concurrency lens yet until we get through the RAISE planning grant process and identify updated costs for existing transportation projects, or perhaps identify different or new projects for downtown now that we're into 2024-25.
So in terms of changing the policy, and I certainly think that the council was misunderstood when we said we wanted to be able to give some people some credit for what was there before, but I don't think that our impression was, with no time limit looking backwards, to be able to go and do that. But in terms of changing the policy, I mean, the policy wasn't really written into the sub-area plan, the policy, there was policy developed to implement the sub-area
Correct.
plan. So if we change the policy, what document do we put the change in?
It is just letting the department know, because this is an administratively adopted document, and it is not something that officially went through the city council ever. It is something that the department does on a relatively frequent basis. They put together direction and rules that, if you want to think of it like state law, and then the administrative code gives you more detail, it's kind of that. So it wouldn't necessarily be an ordinance. It would be a resolution perhaps, or just verbal direction to the department that they need to change that policy.
Yeah, I think the verbal directions is what got us into where we are now.
Okay.
That but in terms of vesting, in other words, if someone has started and gotten a project in the permitting system now, okay, and so there's been some kind of a calculation that either you have or you don't have, that if we were to make a change, so let's say we were to say we're only going to look back, the recommendation on the slide was a year, okay, for 12 months, but someone was working on a project, for instance, and I'm thinking of the oil change place that's going to go in where there used to be a gas station. Okay, so they are probably would, under the current policy, would generate fewer trips than the gas station of 20 years ago did. So does vesting imply that they would be able to, even if we change it, that there are some projects that are in the works that would get the old standard?
Once the complete application is accepted by the city, the rules in place at that time is what is going to apply to the project moving through. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a viable alternative to just do away with it?
Doing away with the policy?
The fee.
Oh. We could bring that back and talk about it for a lengthy amount of time. I think the way the TMF was designed, without the administrative stuff that made significant changes to it, as you see by what's been collected, it is a strictly SEPA-based, so many trips are anticipated, equals these types of expansions to your road system are required, and this business is going to generate so many trips toward that need. So here's the share they would pay. It's a very pure mathematical equation. To come up with something different, we would have to get into some of the types of uses and how much is anticipated of each type of use, perhaps, looking at what kind of share of the total costs they could support. I mean, there's options, but this is the pure SEPA-based analysis. And it should be remembered that even if this was not in place, what that means is each project has to do their own transportation analysis. They would be paying something. It's the question of, is the cost of putting together their own analysis coupled with what they would pay more or less than what this tells them they're going to pay from the get-go without having to do their own math.
Okay, so if I recall discussions back in 2019, the idea was using this process, and we were hopefully the estimates would be right, and we, quite frankly, we got in our own way with that, why the estimates haven't worked out. But that also that the money that came in would be able to be used anywhere within the downtown area, whereas if all the fees were determined project by project, they could be used in areas where you specifically said this project is going to impact this intersection as opposed to the overall traffic pattern.
Correct.
And so that was one of the primary advantages, it seemed to me at the time, of doing this, because then we can allocate the money and do things in a ways that made sense rather than having a little bit of an improvement here and a little bit of an improvement there to someone else. So, I'm looking to do that. And on your slide where it said that the city staff had some recommendations,
Yeah,
Okay. I don't got the slide that says option 1 and option 2 in front of me, so I don't know what this
Oh.
slide means.
so it's basically the administrative policy needs changing. And it can be these specific items or some other combination of direction from the city council. It could be a finding of fact in your ordinance as you pass the regulatory ordinance for the 24 package, or it could be separate in a resolution. And then also deciding whether or not you want to change the public and private share.
Mr. Pearson.
Okay, and then on the current split, since we use a 6-year tip from 2019, that would then everything get repriced and that table be change in the value of a trip be recalculated because we're now into the 2024 to 2029 tip?
As part of the RAISE grant that we just received, we're going to be able to do a reanalysis of all of these projects and any others that might be needed, both motorized and non-motorized within the downtown sub-area. And yes, the costs for those projects would all be updated, and that would be reflected in both your 6-year tip planning, but also in the TMF calculations for projects going forward.
So I understood the RAISE grant is public money.
It is a federal grant, yes.
Yeah, so the fact that we would get a RAISE grant that would be public money, how would that influence the private money? We would still be looking at 50% private money. The RAISE grant doesn't, there was never any particular idea about where the public money would come from to make up the 50%. Or are we saying that the RAISE grant would reduce the total cost? And then after that, it would be 50-50.
If I'm understanding you correctly, Councilmember, the current RAISE grant is for planning only. So it's for the city to go back and re-examine the downtown transportation system and update its planning through, in part, this downtown TMF program. It has nothing to do with actually paying for projects. What could happen, though, is once that is done, and assuming the city is successful in getting a construction grant through the RAISE program, yes, that could be part of all of the public share for the 50-50 split at this point in our program.
So what you're saying is that the RAISE grant and the study that it would fund could be, if we waited to make a decision, the RAISE grant findings could inform us better about what decision we should make.
Correct, and that's the city's recommendation is look at these first two, but don't do the others because we need that information to update everybody's decision-making process.
And then there's some combination of the two. For instance, we could make the policy change that says we're only going to look back 12 months. Okay, but that in terms of the others, like the mix and other things, we could wait on RAISE grant findings, which would be in 2026 to make further tweaks.
Correct, that's the recommendation from the city, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Pearson, and then, yeah, Mr. Pearson. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can you touch on the baseline for the TMF? And so the way it is now, it's whenever the building was built. So how would that change if you did, if we changed it to the effective 2019 date? If you had, a old gas station or something that was built in the 80s or 90s, and then I guess if it's changed or what has to happen, what exactly is happening at the 2019 date if we change it to the 2019 date? If there's been no change, if it's a gas station and they go to a oil changing place and there's been consistent uses, so there's no issue with the timing, and it's a lesser trips, would they not have to pay anything, or because they never paid anything? What is that?
All of those are good. All of those are excellent questions and would need to be considered as part of redesigning how this would actually get implemented project by project. So the idea here is, as you say, the baseline would no longer be whenever a building was last, or a space was last occupied. It would be back to date certain, perhaps 2019 when the TMF program was established, perhaps something more recent. And then where this really makes a difference is if a space has been vacant. Because again, right there, right now, there is no how far back do you go for that either. So if you had a gas station that was in place in 1996 when the city incorporated and had so many trips that you could anticipate based on the ITE manual of the time, or however it would be calculated, and then it's been vacant for 10 years, you would still be using the 1990 calculation. If we were to go back to a 2019 start date, you would look at the ITE manual from 2019 and say, what are the anticipated trips that would have happened at that point? Maybe they're the same, maybe they're different from as far away or far back as it was. If it's not been vacant, if it's been a constant use, then it is looking at the current use, not when it came into the space. What are the current transportation trips versus going back to when it first occupied the space? So I'm probably not answering this as clearly as I should be able to, but the idea here is cleaning up the amount of time it can be vacant and also how far back you go. You're going to end up getting additional funds into the program.
Thank you. So the bullet point 1 and bullet point 2, you wouldn't necessarily have both of those. You would have kind of like either or. Is that because, like, you know, if you
on a particular project, you may have one or the other. This is just for across the board, the standing administrative policy, and based on the project and the location where it would go in, some would apply, some would not. The criteria there.
Okay, yeah, my general thoughts on the TMF, I like the program. I think that it's gonna get more traction. I'm hoping that this big development downtown, you know, people see how easy it is to do the analysis of a project, and you don't have to do, you know, hire any transportation engineers to do it, you know, a TIA and go through the negotiations with the city on, you know, well, you know, these are the mitigation that we're requiring, and it's like, oh, we don't think it's quite, you know, there, and so there's the back and forth. So it really makes it linear, and, you know, here's the dollar amount that you need to pay for whatever you're doing. I like the idea of the program. I think I work in Pierce County, and we have TIF, and people have to get TIAs, and we go through that, and then they pay their fees, and it's just like this whole huge, you know, you got to go through CPFRs, and it's a cluster. This is very straightforward. I like how linear it is. I don't like that it's open-ended from however long ago. I think that's how you end up with places like QFC that would have, you know, $1.5 million worth of TIF that they'd have to pay or something. It'd be a big number. And so, you know, that's a decision point if someone's, you know, just sitting on something like that, that there's a clock ticking that equals a certain amount of money that they're going to have to forfeit or pay, or, you know, so I think that needs to definitely change. The percentages, you know, I don't know how, I don't have a strong feeling really about the percentages, 50-50, 25-75. I don't think that it should go to 75-25 developer side and city side, or sorry, 75 developer, 25 city. I think if anything, it'd stay the same or go like the opposite of that, to 25 city, or sorry, 25 developer, 75 city. But I certainly would be all for somewhere in the 2 to 5 year range, you know. If your structure's been vacant for, you know, 2 years or 5 years, you know, somewhere draw the line that you can't just have something vacant forever. You're going to forfeit your TMF fees.
What's the challenge of tweaking any of this when we've got this ticking time bomb of the 10-year clock? Right, if we can't get these projects done, we got to give all the money back.
At this point, with the amount of money that's been collected, there's not a whole lot
Yeah, no
to
harm, no
worry
foul,
about.
Right, I get it, yeah.
And as the planning commission recommended, spend those dollars now on a particular project and you won't have that issue at all.
Right.
I think it is a matter of being very crafty with when you do get dollars, are they matching for another grant? Are they being used for a small project again or a portion of a project? It'll be, as you say, Councilmember Pearson, hopefully the momentum starts to pick up. Once one big project comes in, other things will follow.
Right.
But that's just the nature of the beast. Impact fees have to be returned as well after a certain number of years.
Right. Well, thinking out loud about the project on the back 40, so to speak, they've gone in for a pre-app. Do they have any inkling of what their proposed TMF fee might be?
It's not yet calculated, so we're not sure.
And on that project, they will get credit for the Barnes and Noble trips.
Maybe portion.
Yeah, the amount of traffic that Barnes and Noble has on that site will be taken into
Yeah.
account. Yes.
Yeah, and it seems like an apartment is going to generate fewer trips than
Right.
they may not have one at all.
Right.
Because Barnes and Noble probably has a significant trip generation cost.
Right. That probably was the whole value of acquiring that parcel in addition to the others.
Yeah, the weird incentive there is that if you take out retail as part of your project,
you decrease
you
your
actually
costs.
reduce your costs. And so probably not what we want to do. I think good suggestions by Councilmember Pearson, although I don't know that this is ever going to generate what we need, given, if a big apartment complex can come in and not pay a dime or not pay very much, not make any road improvements. I mean, we're just gonna get roasted at some point. Like, yeah, you allowed all this development and you didn't get anything out of it. And so I'm for those changes, but and maybe as a stopgap, but I'm not sure it's working. I think that maybe the SEPA process might be better for us. I'm beginning to think that maybe that might be a better way to go, because at least I think, and although I don't understand traffic engineering well enough, because it seems like that hasn't always worked in our favor either in the past, but I would imagine that if we did SEPA process on this back 40, that we would walk away with significant improvements.
Do we have to make the decision on the change to the TMF as part of the comp plan, or could we wait till after the 2026 analysis with the raise grant?
Mr. Mayor, you're able to take this on at any time. These were just things that the council had asked the planning commission to
Right.
consider. So you now have that recommendation in front of you to do with as you will.
So we can chew on this. No decision needs to be made
That
anytime
might even
soon.
make it worse, though.
Right. Yeah, we don't wanna
miss-
do that.
Miss a lot of development, and nobody's doing SEPA, but we're not getting paid anything. I mean, something's got to
Well, right
give
now,
here.
we're into it at 50-50 based upon the admin guidelines.
And if I could, to clarify a little bit what
Yeah.
Councilmember Boki said, there is still SEPA analysis happening, because if the project affects parts of the downtown that are not included on those identified projects, they're still doing that. And there is significant site development, including road improvements and frontage improvements, for instance, for that project that we're talking about. These are the funds specifically for those identified road projects that the downtown sub-area growth said are required. But things coming in that are not on those roads or not directly on those roads are paying for other things as well.
So I'm fine with the 50-50. I just don't think some of these are ever going to grant very well, given our other needs and given how we do in competition for some of our other really more pressing needs, like 100th Street and various things like that. So the 50-50 is fine. I think we do have to close the back door, though. This idea that we can go back to, statehood or cityhood or whatever to determine, just has been sitting there empty forever, right? We're gonna have to fix that, I think. I don't know what the look back should be, 3 years, 5 years, but I wouldn't go anything beyond 5 years.
Councilmember Lorisell and then Mr. Branstad.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Ms. Spear. So we kicked this off in 2019, right? So we have 5 years of data that we can look back on. This generated about 120 grand over 5 years, which I'm guessing our cost to administer this are higher than that. Can we get from the data, looking back at those 5 years, the projected funds that would be raised in each of these options that are presented, in addition to options of removing the program entirely and or removing all the exemptions in the program that have been added?
We can provide very easily what you would have collected if that administrative policy had not been there at all. That, we have that
Yeah,
data
that was
now.
already in there.
Right.
And whatever.
And then in terms of providing you other options, ideas for a different approach to how to implement this program, we can bring that to you on the 26th of July, which would be the study session following your hearing next week. And also some additional ideas perhaps for you to chew on if you'd like.
Yeah, I was thinking specifically the dollar values for the options that you presented in this, right? Option one had a couple of different bullets, option two had one. What that would look like in terms of, had we done that for the past 5 years, what would we look at annually?
We can give that a try. Not sure if we'll get it all the way there, but yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, I really think that the best overall option is to look at it closely with data and things like that, using this raise grant funded assessment to be able to go and do that. So, but what I would like to do is I'd say, clearly the administrative policy with no restriction on the look back timeline is a leak. We're leaking dollars. So I think if we could immediately change that to 3 years, okay, now, and then, the study may tell us that a different look back policy is better, but we at least, be stopping some of the leakage of funds. But looking at the overall viability of funding versus an impact fee and things like that is better left to a more deliberate study funded by the RAISE grant. But I'd like to see us do something now with just that one aspect of the administrative policy.
Yeah. Is that something that we can make a decision on the 26th or not? That's a study session, so we won't be taking any action, but we can certainly get consensus on a direction with the additional data.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's also a study session following your second hearing, so on September 3rd.
Yeah.
So about a month from now, or 3-4 weeks from now, you would be able to talk about it again if you wish.
I think we should do that. Get the
Okay.
data and a chart of the different calculations based on the scenarios, and then we can
Certainly.
make a decision. Good, okay.
Okay. On-street parking, I'm going to go through this much more quickly. We did talk about this at an earlier study session where the whole concept of under the new rules where you have to allow so many more housing units in historically single-family areas, there are also restrictions on the type of on-site parking that you can require, particularly when you're getting close to a transit stop. And as a result, there's an issue perhaps with how Lakewood's current residential road system could handle that or not, right? This map on the right shows the areas in red are stretches of residential roads that are less than 60 feet wide, which is the minimum needed for the residential street standard that the city currently has. And the areas in dark blue are the areas that are not only with less than 60 feet wide right of way, they are also 300 feet away from one that is that wide or wider, meaning people are unlikely to walk from their house if they were to park up to 300 feet away. So all of that to say, just today, actually, the city has started pursuing work on the parking study that would say, because of health safety concerns, the city should be exempt from the requirement to say you have to, how do I say this right? Exempt the city from the requirement to, in essence, force parking onto the street. Because there's areas, if you remember, where whether it's an ADU or if it's a middle housing unit, the city in certain areas close to transit cannot say so many units on site for however many units you have there. That means it turns into either you're walking to transit or you're driving your car. There is a health safety release valve, if you will, in the state statute. And so we are pursuing the study that says, this is the reality in the city of Lakewood. This is where we feel health and safety is a legitimate issue. Therefore, those rules should not apply. And the other thing against all of this background is that a developer, whether they're doing an ADU for a single family owner or whether it is a developer coming in and tearing down existing structures and building a sixplex, they have the decision to go beyond the minimum that the city requires and decide to put it all on site should they wish. So just a heads up that we are pursuing that option and hope to have something by next spring that would maybe just provide the justification needed for the state to say, okay, Lakewood, you are not subject to this limitation on parking on site.
Mr. Branstad.
If I could just understand the slide that you had with the planning commission's recommendation. Previous. So in other words, the planning commission is saying to kick this down the road a year. You know, consider doing something in 2025.
What they are saying, I mean, yes, because we are not ready at this point with updated street design standards or with the results of this study that we're now pursuing. So it would be a matter of, again, a direction from council to the department in our work plan for 25, 26, for instance. These are things you should be doing because of direction from council.
But with respect to the 2024 comp plan amendment, that this recommendation would be don't include amendments that relate to this parking issue this year.
Correct, because they're simply not ready. We don't have all the
Okay,
information.
And the draft that's being circulated for public comment doesn't have such amendments.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, next topic is short-term rental regulations. Again, this is one that has come before you before. In 23, the Planning Commission recommended to you that short-term rentals be allowed across the city in all accessory dwelling units. And there were a few regulations at the time included in that package last year, such as updating regulations to be consistent with state law and also a few other technical things. So those have all been brought forward to this year. The Planning Commission reconsidered whether or not to recommend allowing STRs in all accessory dwelling units in light of the fact that now so many more will be able to be built. And they decided again that they should be allowed, in part because the economic spur of having an option for a short-term rental on your property may mean you build that ADU that much faster. And if the STR isn't successful, then there is a standing long-range rental unit for someone to have. But also in 2024, the city has provided and is included now in the package for the public. Gig Harbor was the basis, but it is a new set of regulations for short-term rentals. So it is creating a new permit or land use type that is approved administratively initially, but if someone wanted to appeal a decision, they would go to the hearing examiner. It allows short-term rentals in all land use zones where residential units are allowed. It is a limitation of one short-term rental permit per operator as of now. And again, that's based on Gig Harbor's model. And then there are performance standards or operating conditions for short-term rentals that are included as well. And so that's all the detail I've got for tonight, but it is available in tonight's packet at page 576. It's also going to be in front of the public for public hearing next week, should anyone want to make comment.
Mr. Pearson, any question on that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Do you have any idea what where the one permit per operator came from? And that seems totally just
Arbitrary.
yeah.
That was as a result of the City of Gig Harbor's council and public engagement conversations. And I spoke with staff actually earlier this week. Yes, earlier this week about this. And what they were concerned about is foreign investors coming in, buying properties, and rather than it even being used necessarily for a short-term rental, it would just sit vacant because they were waiting for whenever property values go up and they turn it over. So they wanted to limit the potential for housing stock to just get held. And even if it was a short-term rental, it didn't have to be. It could have been a long-term rental or someone else living it as the owner. What the staff person said to me was that that concern has not borne fruit, if you will. There haven't been that many foreign investment purchases since the program went in place. And so she wasn't suggesting that that's something we should really consider a good idea. She said it's there, there's a reason behind it, but they haven't seen the concern rise to the level that the council had when they adopted it.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd be just totally fine with striking that out in general. I think that there, maybe Gig Harbor had, we can speculate anyway, but, maybe there were some current concerns about along their waterfront. They didn't want, to have a bunch of this stuff going on. But, I don't think, I think that if we can get units built, people are gonna, most people want to make money or at least break even. And so they're not in the business of just holding on to units that are vacant. So if we can get things built and people want to, do some short-term rentals and we can get some parking out of it, if it's going to be classified as a short-term rental, then it can transition later into, actual housing as an ADU or something. So that's my opinion on this. Thanks.
Yeah, Mr. Boki.
Yeah, I guess I see that point, but I guess my concern more is there's rentals now owned by companies, Invitation Homes being the best example, and they own, I don't know, perhaps 500 or more houses.
Who's that?
Invitation Homes, and they own a lot here in Lakewood. They could theoretically build ADUs on them and own dozens of Airbnbs, right? They could actually. So I do think there is a method to the madness. I don't know if one works, but the idea that business models can change and that a lot of these rentals now are owned by, there's several major companies out there, and at least Invitation Homes owns dozens here in Lakewood. So I think we need to have some discussion around that. I don't know if that one's the right number, but I would have a concern that over time this could turn into a problem. Although I don't know the overall demand for Airbnbs in Lakewood. Right. I mean, just how are they even a good investment?
It's not a resort metropolis.
It is not. Yeah. And so. Yeah.
Yep. And it does, I mean, there's a value to that, right? What I have seen or what I would foresee is you get a local mom and pop here that buys a property on the west side of the city and might buy a property on the east side of the city and create an ADU on both. They would be one operator with two short-term rentals. And so I agree, I wouldn't want to preclude them from doing that.
All right. Just a note regarding the number of STRs in the city. As of May, there was 146 compared to 136 last November. So they are popping up. And the pace may, at least in the short term, increase once these rules all go into effect, right? Where multiple ADUs can now be built on a single parcel. How fast and how quickly all these start to get built remains to be seen, but that's where it sits as of May of this year. The other piece to short-term rentals in the city is this year, the city has already started incorporating these properties into the rental housing safety program, meaning when a city becomes aware of one of these short-term rentals, they notify the owner that, hey, this is the process by which you need to register for regular inspections through the rental housing safety program, and you also need the rental business license from the city. And that will continue to pick up as time goes forward. The city is also looking at a new software program to track the short-term rentals. If you recall, that was part of the conversation at an earlier study session. So these short-term rentals will be part of the rental housing safety program every 5 years inspection process. One more thing of interest, we already talked about a little bit of this last time. So again, I'm going to go rather rapidly, but slow me down if you need to. Right now, the city's critical areas ordinance and its shoreline master program. So we've switched to shoreline properties and how those are regulated for environmental protection. Right now, they're very interrelated and connected because the only place water bodies are identified and their distance of a buffer are identified, whether it's a critical area or a lake or a river shoreline, is in the shoreline master program. What is happening this year is that is being split to where only the shorelines defined to be regulated under the shoreline master program will stay there. All of the other ones will now be regulated under the critical areas ordinance. And there were notifications sent to all of the shoreline property owners in the city, not only to these water bodies, which are those that are recognized in our shoreline master program. And there's also on this slide, the distances right now on the various water bodies. So for instance, American Lake, Gravelly Lake, Lake Louise, and Stillicum Lake, it's 65 feet wide. And then on urban stream protection for Clover Creek, it's 65 plus an additional 8 feet. What you now have is a map that shows all of those water bodies, but additional ones as well. And the distance for buffers on the other water bodies that are now going to be regulated under the critical areas ordinance are significantly more than 65 feet. You have 150 feet being proposed for fish bearing, and then non-fish bearing are at 100 feet. And if they're undesignated, it's also 100 feet. This 150-foot distance is actually less than the recommendation that has come from Department of Fish and Wildlife. It would be 200 feet. Where would that apply? On those red water bodies on the map. And if you go back to this map, those are not identified at all in our shoreline master program. So you have parts of the city where right now those property owners have never had to deal with this question before. And at 200 feet, it would be not only the property owner attempting to do something, but likely nearby neighbors as well, right? So what the city has done is worked on getting a technical memo, which we just received in the last week, that says the 200 feet recommended by West Fish and Wildlife is not, I'll go ahead and use the word appropriate for the city. It is an urban area. It is not a rural area. And given the current status of these buffers and these water bodies, we can get to 95% of the protection by lowering the distance to 150 feet. The 100 feet that's recommended for the other types of water bodies is based on best available science. The city has to follow that per state law, but there is this one change that the city is recommending based on that technical analysis, and that's highlighted there in yellow on the screen. So again, the big lakes and Clover Creek, no change. They are continue to be regulated under the Shoreline Master Program, but those other water bodies that are in pink and red there on the map, and then they're harder to see, but there's also some gold streams, one of which is down in the Woodbrook area, one is in Springbrook. Those would be at 100 feet or 150 feet. So those are where there's been questions asked by members of the public. We did have an open house specifically on this and a hearing after that open house at the Planning Commission level where people were able to ask questions.
Does it make any sense to have a bigger buffer where you got basically a little puddly wetland as opposed to a small buffer where you got a big body of water? Doesn't make any sense to me. But
As it stands, our shoreline master program is from 2019 and we don't need to update it until
Right.
2029. When that happens in 2029, you may well see a 65-foot buffer increase. But as it stands, the city is going to keep with its current program and its current protection level, but the critical areas are going to move ahead because state law and best available science has been updated.
Okay. Can I ask a question about FLET? So the main part of FLET there, the recommendation is 200. But a good portion of FLET between Lockburn on the south and whatever on the north is swamp or lowland, right? It's wet for a good portion of the year. So how does this factor in? The creek you have running right through all that, but in fact, the wetland starts like, let's say Lockburn, way to the south. So how does this rule impact?
The wetlands are going to have their own protections. This is specific to the rivers and creeks and lakes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're under different set.
Correct.
Okay.
It's still in the critical areas ordinance, but it is its own regulation, sure. So other development regulations, one last thing I wanted to touch on very quickly tonight, and we can certainly pick this up at the next study session if you like. But the zoning, again, coming back to housing, you'll see here on this map in the dots over the yellow around the major transit stops, that is where a new overlay is being proposed for residential transit. That is where there's going to be more housing and less parking. So we touched about that on that a little bit earlier. The way the city is going to regulate this going forward is to ask a couple of questions when a project comes in. A, is it within a quarter mile of transit? B, is it on a lot with critical areas or buffers or not? And then C, are there any additional affordable housing, meaning below market rates, 60% or below, 80% or below being offered? And the answers to all of those questions will dictate the number of units per lot that will be allowed on that specific lot. There is a new way to divide up a single family lot to allow multiple units, and that is part of the regulatory chapter coming under 1724. Here are a couple of examples. Very quickly, R2, residential 2, the minimum lot size there is 17,000 square feet. But if you are on a lot that's within a quarter mile of a transit stop with no critical areas, you could move that up to 10 units per acre, which is about a 4,200 square foot lot. So if you have a 17,000 square foot lot, you could be doing 4 units on newly created 4 lots of middle housing. That's the type of analysis that's going to happen. If we jump to an R1 lot, residential 1, that's a 25,000 square foot minimum right now. If you did not have any critical areas on that site, you move from 1 unit on that lot to up to 3.5 roughly, or about a 12,500 square foot lot. So you could end up with 2 single family somethings on that lot rather than 1, and then ADUs on top of that. If you were on an R1 lot with critical areas, that limits you to a lower density, and you would not be looking at the subdivision of that lot at all because of the limitation of a critical area protection that's required.
So there would actually be a subdivision of that lot?
There can be a subdivision of that lot to create fee simple ownership. Yes, that doesn't have to be, but there can be.
Got it. Okay. Mr. Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. How does this relate to the open space requirements on lots and max impervious and stuff? Is there,
It has to be adjusted.
how does this balance with some of that? Because I guess if to some extent, if you keep things the same or you even, well, we're gonna have more units, well, we want more open space, then the units go up because you can't go up with open space, presumably. So how does that relate?
There's a two-level answer, if you will. So right now, there are changes to the development regulations in this package that, on the one hand, answer state law that says these middle housing units can have no more strict regulations than a single-family detached house can. The city is limited from adding anything more complex, more difficult to complete. But we are not done with the process of updating our regulations for specifically the middle housing type of development. That will be coming to you next summer as part of the 25 comprehensive plan amendments. So we're doing this first zoning change, and then next spring, you'll see that coming to you as a draft. So there may be some things as we're adopting it right now that will stay as they are. There may be some amendments to make sure, again, that this type of higher density is going to all make sense in the development scheme.
One more follow-on to that. So if you wanted to kind of, you know, push back a little bit on some of this stuff, you could tinker with the impervious surface coverage or the open space to kind of, you know, for all residential, if you increase the open space a little bit, that would kind of make some of this not quite as advantageous, right? Is that?
Anything that the city were to adopt regarding middle housing or ADU development has to apply to all types of housing.
Right.
And if you do that, you may not have this happen as fast, but you're also coming up against your growth targets.
Yeah.
And so looking at what the number is that you're supposed to be heading for as a jurisdiction over the next 20 years would be the other side of that question.
Okay, thanks.
Real quick, just a clarifying question. The R2 lot example, you said within 1/4 mile of a major transit stop without critical areas. The next two examples, does that assume the 1/4 mile of within a major transit stop or not?
They do not, and they don't because of where the R1 is located in the city. It's right next to the, right, it's right next to the lakes for pretty much all of it. So other than that, Mr. Mayor, I'm just going to let you know that for each chapter in this presentation, which was provided as part of the materials, there's a high-level summary of each regulatory change for each chapter of Title 14, 17, 18A, B, and C. And then within the packet as well, there was that audit of the regulatory changes, similar to what happened with the comp plan, meaning column 1 is the current regs, column 2 says, is there a change, yes or no? Column 3, what's the new language? So that's another way to use your time more efficiently, is look at the audit table to see where the big changes are.
Go ahead. Okay. With respect to the transit stops things, this thing is very vague, okay? That Pierce Transit has essentially abandoned or put on very long-term hold bus rapid transit development. So we were using something that they proposed as possible BRT results that they put out about 4 years ago when they were trying to do the Pacific Avenue route, and they found they can't even make it work as bus rapid transit there. So that there really is not any timeline or any firm things other than an old plan that's now been shelved by Pierce Transit for bus rapid transit.
Only for BRT 1.
Yeah.
We are BRT 2. Lakewood would be.
Yeah, but the plan always was not until they finished the BRT 1, they weren't going to do any BRT 2s. So there really is no, we've got a lot of routes that we're including in our planning that Pierce Transit is no longer planning on. Or they're not calling them bus rapid transits. They're working on something else. So I think that's the thing is that we're planning against a plan that was in the past that isn't the plan by the transit people now.
This speaks to major transit stops currently existing, right?
Or planned.
Well, how do they, to his question, how do they define planned, right? Because the BRT 2 is an option that's still coming to Lakewood, from my perspective. So they're gonna still do that, but it's gonna be down the road at some point in time, probably 4 to 5 years.
Yeah. The best way to answer that question is the city needs to rely on what plans are in place.
Right.
And right now, the Pierce Transit Transit Agency is conducting its development of a new long-range plan through
Right.
2045. The city actually is meeting with them this Friday to talk about those plans.
Yep.
And if it comes out of that conversation that they just make it clear we can take that off the books, then certainly the zoning proposition for the distance from a major transit stop might change
Yep.
between now and when council takes action. But as it sits, we're going off of their current long-range plan, and that includes the BRT route.
And I appreciate hearing that you are actually meeting with them on Friday, because one of the big things the commissioners on the Pierce Transit Board directed them to do with their long-range plan was to coordinate with cities with our comp plan development. So that's great to hear that that's happening.
All right, so I'm going to jump through a number of slides very quickly because, as I mentioned, they are all in the packet, ready for you to review as needed. But this is your upcoming schedule. So next Monday is a hearing, then there's a study session, then there's another hearing, then there's another study session, and then you're scheduled for action. So there's opportunity at those study sessions to obviously discuss amongst yourselves, but also ask further questions of staff or provide direction for amendments. And then we would be bringing you those 3 ordinances for action September 16th. And that
Great.
concludes my presentation unless you have any other questions.
Any other questions? Well, we appreciate all your hard work on this because that is a large body of work. So thank you for
Sure. Thank you.
keeping us up to speed. All right, so our last topic tonight, after a 3 to 4 minute recess, so we can stand up and shake our legs a little bit, is a review of the funding requirement or funding agreement with Sound Transit for the Lakewood Station access improvements. So come on down, folks, but give us just about 3 or 4 minutes to take a quick break here. Okay, next, we're gonna review the funding agreement with Sound Transit with our Capital Projects Division Manager, Troy Pokswinski.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. As you mentioned tonight, we're going to go over the agreement, the funding agreement for the Lakewood Station Access Improvement Project, or really it's a program because it's a bunch of projects that we have through there. So I'll go through a brief background followed by, if this thing works here, sorry about that. Followed by where we're currently at and where we're proceeding through forward before delving into the projects. So pretty brief background. As part of ST2 in 2008, voters authorized the Lakewood Station Access Improvement Project, what was really initially conceptualized as a parking improvement to access agreements, expand parking at the station at the later stages of the ST2 program, which is slated to be completed in the first quarter of 2030. Late in the stages of the planning process, Sound Transit staff noticed that, hey, you know, this particular station, Lakewood Station, as well as the South Tacoma stations, are not seeing immense need for additional parking. So they moved forward with a program of non-motorized improvements to try to incentivize and encourage non-motorized access to the stations. They went through a rigorous public outreach process at that time, and it came up with a good list of projects, presented that to their board in March of this year, and their board has approved it. Following approval, the Sound Transit reached out to the city of Tacoma for the South Tacoma improvements and the city of Lakewood for the Lakewood Station access improvements to try to help them get through this in the next 5 years-ish. 5 years is what we've got left on it. And now we're moving forward as it sits. So the path moving forward is for this agreement. Sound Transit met with their system extension or their system expansion committee last Thursday, August the 8th, for concurrence. They meet with their full board for approval of this funding agreement on the 22nd, and we're here tonight with you guys, and we will be before you with a motion next Monday night for the city manager to authorize the agreement. So the list of projects, Sound Transit has listed 8 projects in priority 1, 2 projects in priority 2. 8 projects in priority 1 are what they estimate can be done with the $31.6 million. There are additionally 3 projects in priority 2 that the city feels like we can get done with the money that they have allocated. We'll go through them each. I list 13 projects, excuse me, as I break out the Pierce Transit Route 206 bus stops, or no, Pierce Transit Route 206 bus stops and sidewalks in Springbrook, and the Springbrook area sidewalk and bike connections, because there's a lot of streets on that, and there's a reason why we're breaking those out. So the list that I have before you is kind of how we're planning on tackling these. There's nothing set in stone with them, but from a logistics standpoint, the reasoning for the department recommending moving forward with these will kind of reveal itself here as we go through. First project is New York Avenue from McCord Drive from Pack Highway to Bridgeport. This project will be reconstructing the road in its entirety, new streetlights, aluminum streetlights, new storm drainage, curb and gutter on both sides, sidewalk only on the north side, and a 5-foot gravel path on the south side. The New York overcrossing of I-5 will be, the barriers we scraped off, we'll put new barriers on there and put in 6-foot sidewalk on the north side. The reason for putting this one right at the front, obviously, is we have to get out in front of WashDOT for the extensive design and planning that goes into this. Sound Transit is a year out for their starting of this process on the 47th Avenue Bridge, and we may potentially reach out with them to discuss a supplement to this agreement for moving that forward to try to make sure that they can streamline their aspects of it.
What does a reconstructed pavement mean?
So reconstructed pavement means that we are gonna take it down to gravel and start back over again. The existing roadways are just completely shot in this area. They're old oil mat or chip seal roads that are just not good for building upon. So that's New York Avenue. 112th Street would be the next one. We just completed the improvements along 112th between Gravelly and Highland on the north side. We will do the same on the south side, and then also do north and south side. That's streetlights, curb gutter, sidewalk on both sides, 5-foot bike lanes on both sides, and new storm drainage from Gravelly all the way to Bridgeport. Again, we will take out the entire segment of pavement out there. We found with the north side that the pavement's incredibly thin. You're talking 2 inches of existing pavement
All
out
the
there.
sidewalks we just put in, that's not gonna be touched, right?
Those stay.
Yeah.
All the sidewalks. So the only thing that will remain as it is are the streetlights on the north side we just installed and the sidewalks on the north side. So.
Mr. Branstad.
In the work that we have done on 112th, where we put the the sidewalks and that, and we put some, along that stretch, we put some pedestrian lighting. Is there going to extend the pedestrian lighting down in the same manner as a supplement to the street lighting on this project?
Yes, both sides will get that, and we will even look at taking down the existing streetlights on the wood poles. In order
Okay, so maybe it says aluminum streetlights. Is like pedestrian lighting the next bullet down that I can't see, or is it just not there yet?
No, I'm sorry. I meant, when I said aluminum streetlights, I meant the pedestrian size. We may look at the south side going to full height. I need to check to see which side the power poles are running on. I think there might be power poles on both sides. I can't recall on this. We would look at full height on the south side and then continue this short on the north.
Yeah, it's a nice project right now. Did a good job, yeah.
So that would be the next one. Obviously, we're kind of ready to go with that. Kendrick Street would be the follow-on from that. Again, full curb gutter sidewalks, repave the road, bike lanes on both sides. It's a continuation of Kendrick Street from the south. This goes from 111th to 108th. Pretty straightforward in the Station District there. Just kind of wanted to get that one in because there's not much issues with this one as well.
How does this impact the transit-oriented development that's going on there? Is that right to the south there? Where the new apartments are going in?
I believe, are they not to the south in the Kendrick area? That's already been done?
Yeah, I think those are already in the Park Kendrick Street, it's already that side.
Okay. South all the way, okay.
Exactly. So that project is slated to move forward, and then we have a small, very, very small project that Sound Transit has authorized. The portion on the left side of the screen at Occident and 111th, you can see on the very right of that picture on the half, there's our existing sidewalk we just improved. From 111th, we will look at with Sound Transit at extending these curb ramps for whatever reason. They don't make a whole lot of sense to us right now, but we'll look at extending and connecting to those sidewalks. I don't know why they are doing that. And then the portion to the right, they must have had a public comment during their public outreach about a ramp at Sharondale and Halcyon. So just replacement of a ramp is all that is. We will look at combining this very small project with the Kendrick Street just to make sure we're getting economy of scale. The next project is a little bit more complex. We put this further back because Sound Transit, in the upper right-hand portion of the screen, you'll see a red line. Sound Transit is building a pathway from the improvements the city will construct all the way to the station. within the existing railway right of way. In addition, they need to grab some right of way to connect. There's a parcel between the railway or two parcels, excuse me, between the railway and the cul-de-sac at 115th. So Sound Transit needs to go get some right of way. So we're pushing this one out a little bit, but we want to start design on this early because there's an enhanced crossing that we're looking at needing to build at 115th and Bridgeport. It potentially could be a traffic signal. We don't like doing RFBs or rectangular rapid flashing beacons at four-lane intersections or roadways, as they're just not the safest thing for pedestrians. We will look at either a full signal, not certain about a hawk signal or a half signal either, for reasons that Pierce County just doesn't have them, and we're not certain we want to be the first to throw that out there.
Couldn't be elevated over Bridgeport.
Yeah.
Pedestrian overpass.
Yeah. Be nice. Exactly. So that's something that we're looking at there. That's what Sound Transit's analyzing here. We haven't seen anything yet. Obviously, since there's nothing on 115th to connect to the station, I don't believe that there's anything going through there now. They've even got fencing up there to keep people off the railway. So I don't know if that's their intention here. Yep, Tyee Park. The next one up, we would propose doing is Lincoln Avenue between McCord and San Francisco. Again, we're going to reconstruct the pavement, curbs along both sides, sidewalk, both sides, storm drainage, and streetlights all the way through there. That's a decent sized project at $2.5 million. The next is a very small project at the intersection of Pacific Highway and Bridgeport at the northeast corner. Pierce Transit is requesting we reconfigure the island so that they can put buses on that segment. Right now, their buses won't fit through that radius supposedly. So it's a pretty small, just modification of the island. We could easily move this forward if we are ever stuck in one of the projects. We're ready to go with that, but we're showing it toward the back because it's one of the smaller deals. We would love to move Clover Creek Drive up from Pacific Highway to Hillcrest. However, Sound Transit needs to construct the improvements in the railway. So that's part of the reason why we're looking at 47th to see if we can alleviate some of their design time in order to move this forward. But in order for us to connect the little small segments of sidewalk from Pac Highway to the railway and then from the railway toward Hillcrest, we need to wait for Sound Transit. They're tied to their horizontal and vertical with the railway. 47th Avenue from Clover Creek to Pac Highway is the last priority one project we have listed. It's curb gutter sidewalk, the roadway shot out there. It is currently exclusive of the bridge overcrossing of 47th and I-5, which is to be performed by Sound Transit. There's also right-of-way needed at the south end of the bridge. So we've pushed this one out as far as we possibly can in order to make sure that we connect with them and not tear things up. It is. It's a dead end kind of just north of the creek. There's a little turnaround by the existing apartments. We'll run all the way down to those apartments and connect with the park. We have a pedestrian crossing at the park. We'll make sure we get that tied in. Yep. It'll be closed to local access only. We'll make sure we keep local access. All of these projects will require road closures. Not something we're trying to do recently. We're trying to get away from that, but with the road completely torn out, there's not much we can do with it. The first priority two we would look at are the three interior roads, if you will, in Springbrook, which are Boston, Chicago, and San Francisco. This is a rather large project at $5.3 million. It's quite extensive. It would require bike lanes on both sides, curb gutter sidewalk, new street lights, all the way through new roadway.
Beautiful.
The second of the priority 2 projects we'd like to tackle is Davison right here south of City Hall between 112th and 108th. We're proposing 5-foot bike lanes, curb gutter sidewalk both sides, and streetlights. The third project we were proposing for priority 2 is McCord and 47th. Again, that roadway is completely shot. If you've been out there, it's curb gutter sidewalk on both sides, streetlights. And lastly, 111th is a small little segment between Clover Park High School and that other segment from number, I believe it was number 11 or 10 or 11, project 10 or 11. And with that, I would ask for any questions you have.
So remind me of the differences between priority 1 and priority 2, just timing.
It's timing and where Sound Transit has cut the project list off that they have had. So they went through the extensive public outreach process. They found that these are the projects they want done first. They had enough money from what they estimated to get through priority 1.
Okay.
When we took our estimates off, we found that we're within 250,000 of completing the entire list. So we should be okay.
Okay. For priority 1 anyway, right?
Priority 1 and priority 2.
Oh, okay, great. Yes, sir. Question.
So we submitted our recommendations to Sound Transit, right? And did we get everything we asked for or had recommended for them to do as projects?
Yes.
Thank you. Good job to you and the team.
Yeah, it's really a nice bucket of projects for the city. Areas that we would not otherwise get grant money, other funds for, so it's great. Well, very good. In the absence of any other questions, kudos to you and the team, and thanks for the work. Yep. Well, that concludes the items for discussion for our study session tonight in a robust 3+ hour time. Those items scheduled for the next regular city council meeting on August 19 are set forth in your packet. We can now turn to reports by Mr. Caulfield.
Thank you, Mayor. The only update that I have is I want to thank the council for getting back regarding scheduling a legislative retreat. And it looks like the 5th Monday, September 30th is going to work, and would suggest a 6 p.m. start with maybe some dinner.
September 30th. Let's
That's
just
it.
take a look.
Oh, you are? Good.
Got it. Okay,
Oh.
very good. September 30th. Got it. All right. That works. Was that it? Oh my gosh. Be still my heart.
Is that what I got to do? That's all I got to do to get your heart palpitating?
Yeah,
Is have a short
exactly. Yeah,
report?
yeah. Shorten the Reports. All right, well, very good. Well, I won't look a gift horse in the mouth. Let's start with council comments. Mr. Boki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Really enjoyed being involved in National Night Out. And I would point out some sad news, though. I believe that Big Lots is now on the closing list nationally for, in fact, they've already started their sale according to my bride. So we made the first cut, and then the second cut came around and we were in it. So I'm hoping that we can work with the landlord to maybe find a replacement to that store. It really fit well, I think, with the Lakewood community. I mean, it met the market, I think. And so hopefully we'll find something to replace it.
Very good. Well, I thought they would be single-handedly, sustained with Holly's shopping there.
Yeah.
So. Councilmember Lauricella.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also really enjoyed National Night Out. We hit 6 stops on our tour. The first one, I wanted to be close to Hipkins to talk to the residents about the project there and how that went. And they were appreciative of it. They don't mind the roundabout at Northway, which is a good sign.
That's a really good sign, right?
I also stopped at the block party at 100th and the Coven. And we'd had people last week come in to talk about
Oh, right.
the
Okay.
vacating of the property there and talk to the residents. And they were also very appreciative of city council listening to what they had to say. So looking forward to that vote next week. And then 4 other stops along the way at other various parties that were exciting. And I made sure to eat something at every one. So
Good for you.
I had my fill of hot dogs and hamburgers and eventually pork tenderloin and short ribs at the last stop, which was really nice. So thanks to all of our residents for being good hosts and for our Liquid PD captains for driving each of us around.
Great.
It was good to get their perspective on things too. I enjoyed a review of the council goals tonight. I think they really align well with our departments in the city. The downtown park and community center and the sub-area plans tie in with community and economic development. Public safety ties in Liquid PD, and the parks and lakes access go to our Parks and Rec division. So it aligns well. I appreciate a hierarchy of structure for the city that matches our goals. So I'm sure it's by design, so I appreciate it. The last thing I wanted to mention, in a couple of weeks, we're going to talk about our remaining ARPA funds, and I'd like to consider, based on the feedback we've gotten from our residents, whether we could launch a project or a commitment to increase the resources that we put towards maintaining our parks and street ends and those areas that people talk about getting trash that builds up, and just having more patrols in those areas, whether that's an option. So something to think about.
No, good question, good point.
Yeah, thank you.
Did you happen to go to the one on the Interlochen Bridge area, that one?
No, I didn't get over to that one.
Okay, Councilmember Bell.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to say that I really appreciated the presentations today. I thought that they were amazing, very informative. A lot of work was put into it by staff and to keep us abreast on everything. And I really do, I feel really good about our council goals and what we're moving forward with, and that they're in alignment with everything that we are working towards. So thank you.
Great. Councilmember Pearson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I would echo Ms. Bell's comments about the goals, and when I looked at it, it really was like, yeah, this is exactly what I remember from our retreat, and I thought it was well articulated, touched on all the important points, and then I would also, yeah, the presentations tonight were detailed, and there's a lot of work that goes into that. So I just want to commend staff for the massive amount of work that it takes to put that together, and that they're going to be continuing to put together for the next month. So I enjoyed the night out last week. That was my first one. So it was good to just drive around and get chauffeured around and, pop into the different neighborhood events. Yeah, went to one that was supposed to be there that wasn't, and then just went to the next one. So and kind of, yeah, we were pretty mobile. I think we visited 5 or 6. So yeah, it was good.
Very good, thank you. Councilmember Brandstetter.
Thanks, Mayor. I too had some good conversations during the night out journeys that I had. I did stop by the one that was there on Interlochen. Generally, the theme of what the folks said there is that they just don't want Interlochen to be an arterial. They'd like it to be a neighborhood street. I think amongst the people there wasn't consensus exactly about how to do that in terms of one way or a direction or whatever to do that. But they think that it's the nature of the street is such that it shouldn't be put into the street system as essentially a secondary arterial like it is now. to be able to go and do that. I think the folks that have, this year was a mix of new locations that hadn't done nights out before and ones that have been long-term things to do that. So I think that that's good that that is is going on. And I did see Chris out, you know, our neighborhood guy. And quite a number of them talked about how they found working with him to be, you know, encouraging, okay,
Good.
and helpful. And, you know, they thought that he listened and did, and it has been a good conduct of information to and from them to go on. Caitlin Miller, the young lady who we awarded a scholarship to, along with the Lions Club, is enrolled at the University of Washington, is getting started, is doing that. But she's also looking at staying engaged as sort of an alumni liaison to the youth council, which is
that's great.
A positive thing to do that. And I was encouraged to see that the Nourish Food Bank is making some progress on their fundraising to reshape the old mattress store, the mattress rant into an upscale food bank and service center to be able to go and do that. Because I read they got a significant donation from Key Bank and that they're looking to do some things. But that's really all I have.
Very good. Deputy Mayor Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with all the comments that have been made about our presentations tonight. I have a very well given. I really appreciate the participation for National Night Out. It was a lot of people and they had a lot of fun things going on. It was great doing the ride along. I had the opportunity to hear a flock camera go off because it passed a car that was reported stolen. It just happened to be not in Lakewood. It was in Nebraska or someplace. But to see how that worked, it was interesting. And to be able to identify it now, I can see, I can be a good girl. Yeah, so it was fun, really good and good interpretations to me and as to how they react. And it was very educational for me that night.
Absolutely.
I did go to the ribbon cuttings this afternoon at Ray Grape Carbon.
Oh, good.
The restaurant there, really, very nice, very nice. So I hope that people will take advantage of it because that's something that they've been wanting, was a higher end restaurant in Lakewood. So if we could get that word out to the people and get people to attend there so they can continue to be open. I met the owner. He's very personable, excited to see that the city is supporting them,
Good.
they're behind them and that, so.
Did they give a reason for the reopening? Because they were open for a while and then they closed for,
They had to do some more remodeling and it wasn't to their satisfaction,
Okay.
the remodel of it,
Huh.
so. Yeah, so
Yeah, I've been before.
yeah,
You've been too,
Mhm.
yeah.
they have a great happy hour.
Oh, it's excellent. It's
Mhm.
very good.
well, that'll be good.
We should get the indicator that Monday session.
Tell him
That's a
that.
great
Yes.
idea. Yeah, I like that idea.
While I was at this ribbon cutting though, I did have a conversation with a gentleman that has business on Pack Highway here.
Mhm.
And his concern is the park, that little park that's there that has just a bench there.
Oh, right. Mhm.
Yeah, a lot of homeless and drug paraphernalia
Oh, geez.
taking
Okay.
place there. So he asked if the city could please do something to get the people out of there.
We already
Apparently,
raised that to city manager on that.
yeah, and I told him to come and, bring to the public comment because
Okay.
those are things that we can work with.
Well, as of the time of the ordinance, its implementation, that is public property, so, yeah.
Yeah, and I did explain that portion to them. And lastly, the little pantry that we have throughout
Mhm.
Lakewood, they're in need of toiletries.
Okay.
So if we can, anybody that have anything that they want to donate to that, that would be good. They announced that at Rotary on Friday. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Very good. Well, I will echo the thanks to staff for the presentations tonight. I thought they were all very, very well done, very thorough, obviously, and led to some good outcomes. Thanks to all of you. You know, it's refreshing that we all are able to really dig through this stuff and work to build consensus on most all of these issues. So it makes it great for the residents of Lakewood and certainly much more interesting and engaging for the rest of us because we work so well together. So thank you for that as well. The only comment I had on the PSAC meeting is perhaps we do some additional work to make them feel special when they go out and meet with the community. Little name tags. It might be something simple. It's low cost, but it makes them feel like they've got some identity. And I do like the idea of some sort of tool or handout that provides kind of a talking piece for them to meet with residents that talks about, did you know about X, Y, and Z with regard to our progress with crime stats or whatever we're doing. So that might be something we can do for them. On the series of meetings, I was at the Pierce Transit meeting today. My series of meetings started at 4 o'clock and now it's 10:30. But they went through a lot of project work. The big part of it is applying the $14.7 million FTA grant they recently received for 4 additional electric buses and all the infrastructure to charge the buses. So they're on this progress to make sure that they're almost fully electrified by 2030 something. And that was a big lift to get that grant. So they're putting it to good use. So that was a good meeting today. What else was I going to say? Thank you for standing in when I was gone for the last meeting. I was on my little 2-week trip. The one thing that was interesting when I visited one of the cities in France, Bordeaux, the one thing that was made clear to me through the walking tours is that the citizens were incredibly thankful for the work that their mayor and council had done in the early 90s, where they made a decision to completely rethink what the downtown would be like. And so they made a decision to make it pedestrian and friendly. And they closed off a lot of the streets and it was chaos for 2 years. To get it all to come to fruition, they moved the port areas to another far end of the city so that they had this beautiful promenade abutting the river there. And it is a gem and people love it. And they talk a lot about the vision that the council had that time that resulted in this really vibrant, pedestrian friendly, very tourist active city. So you can scale those decisions down. Obviously, that's a bigger city than ours, but making the decisions like we're doing with the goals tonight with the downtown park will be seeds well planted and hopefully will result in great utilization and a very vibrant city, you know, some 5 to 10 years from now. So that was my feedback from Bordeaux. And then on last Monday night's council meeting, I did log in. It was 3 or 4 in the morning and listen to all the public comments. So I just want to let you know I heard all of that and I'll be ready to have a conversation with you next week when we do that or whatever the next meeting is going to be on that. I think it's the 19th. So that's all I have. Thanks again for your attention tonight.